The events unfolded in a special city, where the expected holiday was on the threshold. This year promised to be a particularly exciting year at the festival, which was set to surpass previous ones with remarkable events. Each family sought to stand out, hoping to receive a blessing from the dragon. There were rumors that the dragon deity in this village was so powerful that people from neighboring villages came to pray to it. The king, generous and benevolent, sacrificed many animals, thanks to which there were many piglets that year. Suddenly, the cakes left next to the pig began to instantly fall off the table. This unexpected turn confused the two men very much. They could not understand why it happened. The frightened men even thought that the pig could have done it, but it was already cooked. Fearing heavenly punishment, the men looked around, feeling that something was wrong here. Even the birds began to leave the village, as if anticipating danger. The stunned man who noticed this became even more frightened by what he saw. Dozens of stones began to fall from the giant mountain, a harbinger of trouble for the inhabitants. The ground under the festive place began to crack, the rock mass collapsed, threatening life. It soon became clear that an earthquake had occurred and all festival participants had to flee. The rockfall intensified due to the strong earthquake, forcing people to flee the destruction. The destruction became more and more severe. The stones seemed to explode under the influence of an earthquake. And then, out of the fog created by the rockfall, a mysterious figure appeared. She was an unknown girl, and no one could understand how she managed to survive on this mountain. The girl was hungry and was looking for the dragon cook. Looking down, she saw various leftover food from the festival. On the floor lay a lot of food intended for the gods. However, the unknown girl did not like the taste of this food at all. It was disgusting. Angered by this turn of events, she shouted that she would find the dragon cook, no matter where he was hiding. Because of her rage, she added that he would either come to her or she would kill the dragon cook. Feeling great fear, the young man immediately exclaimed that he was not the dragon's cook. It turned out that it was a dream of a young guy who amazed him with its plot. Sometime later, events continued to develop in Sichuan, an amazing place. This region was known not only for its wonderful views and abundance of products, but also as a unique pantry of Chinese gastronomy. One of the restaurants prepared amazing dishes, famous for their taste and original approach. An experienced chef prepared fried chicken pieces with red peppers for the third table and a special salad. Stir-fried chicken pieces with red pepper are soft and fresh, and this dish is popular in Sichuan cuisine. Autumn flower salad is a unique recipe from the Mo family and is known for its delicious shape and genuine crunch. The food is truly amazing and guests constantly praise the head chef. While one of the guys was playing on his smartphone, not paying attention to the cooking, the waitress approached the young man to inform him that the dish for the third table was ready and to find out when to serve it. Realizing that the guy was busy, the alarmed waitress began to leave, knowing that she would not wait for an answer. Suddenly, the guy put down his phone and asked to bring the autumn flower salad here to look at it. This check worried all the cooks, and the gentleman wanted to know who prepared this salad. The stressed-out chef admitted that he was the creator of the salad and was willing to answer questions. Chopped radish, neatly laid out on a plate, resembled an autumn chrysanthemum, which was the name of this dish. This dish also required subtlety, transparency, and softness. The hero decided to ask the boss, named Zhang Sherbua, doesn't he think that the radish is thick and uneven, and doesn't have anything in common with a flower petal? The chef decided to redo the dish, and ordered himself to practice with a knife every hour of the next day for such a mistake. Not understanding anything, Zhang Sherbua was furious and did not believe the words. Anger took over him, and he could not accept the fact that he could not cook this wonderful dish. He started shouting, calling it absurd, claiming that a radish couldn't be thick and uneven, and the boss wanted to see the hero's skill in action. The other chefs held the chef back as he wanted to attack the hero for challenging his dish. Zhang Shibua exclaimed that the hero is a loser who interferes with the cook's cooking. The chief threw his hat as a sign of contempt for the hero. Turning around, he added that he expected to work at Mo's reputable restaurant, but instead he had to listen to the guy's instructions, and Zhang Shibua couldn't stand it anymore. Suddenly, the guy ordered the boss to stop, noticing that the conversation was not over yet. The young man declared that he was truly a failure, but the Mo family strives for excellence in cooking, and as a cook, he does not value his food and does not respect the opinions of others. That's why Zhang Shibua doesn't deserve to be a chef. The elderly man did not understand how the words of a loser could make Zhang Shibua is not worthy, and then someone asked what would happen if these were his words. It turned out that it was Mo Hong's grandfather, the head of Mo's home cooking restaurant, the president of the Sichuan Cuisine Association, and no one could understand what he was doing here. The old man actually heard their argument and wanted to express his opinion. The cooks were very afraid of the owner, realizing that for Zhang Shibua is not a good sign. Mo Hong explained that they may be right that Mo is nitpicking about details, but the company's reputation is based on excellence, and excellence in cooking is what makes them unique. The owner decided to ask Zhang Shibua how well he cooks and whether he really pays attention to every knife and spatula he uses. Realizing that he was in a difficult situation, the cook fell to his knees and begged to be allowed to work in this establishment. However, the old man was merciless and asked for a favor, begging him to stop trying to become part of the great. Starting to cry, Zhang Shibua admitted his guilt and begged Mr. Mo Hong to forgive him. Sometime later, the grandfather and his grandson were having lunch together, and the older man was telling Tin that things had been difficult lately and he should take care of himself. The guy didn't even understand his grandfather's words, because he is the 28th generation of the Mo family and must devote himself entirely to work. The experienced chef claimed that his talent in the culinary arts deserves high praise, but the grandfather still wanted to tell his grandson about one nuance. The happy guy interrupted him, saying that he might have problems with his hands, but that didn't mean he was hopeless. That is why he decided to demonstrate his true skill, seeking to prove his true strength. Raising his leg, he easily picked up a kettle of boiling water, demonstrating an unusual trick. Bravely throwing the kettle into the air, the guy used his leg for this trick. From the force of the throw, the kettle began to spin surprisingly, but not a drop of boiling water spilled from it. At that moment, when the kettle was spinning, the guy easily put it on his leg. This sight truly amazed Mo Hong, realizing that this child was something amazing. The old man even began to cry, realizing that Tin was persistent and trying very hard. The guy calmly said that everything was fine with him, and he was ready to continue working. Suddenly, the cook started running, shouting that he was afraid something was wrong. A crowd of people gathered outside the restaurant, and even Ting dropped the kettle because of it. The young man was in shock, trying to understand who wanted to make a fuss and why. At this time, a luxury car with unknown people drove up to the restaurant. The people outside the restaurant could not understand what the strangers were doing, because the Mo family was considered very pious, and conflicts with them were incredibly rare. While strangers noticed the sign, even it was damaged, giving them the impression of a serious violation. The unknown people continued to study the sign, drawing conclusions about this establishment. The young guy decided to find out from his colleague whether this was really the same restaurant, because it looked like an old diner full of disappointments. The elderly man exclaimed, claiming that this was indeed the place they had been looking for so long. Tears even sparkled in his eyes, because he realized that 100 years had passed since the last time he had been here. After this, the unknown man said that it was time for the Mo family to pay for what happened back then, and the price would be high. Suddenly, Tin came out of the restaurant and asked the hooligans what they were doing here. Radiating strong anger and rage, the hero looked at the strangers and immediately realized that it was them. The hooligans who arrived also realized that this guy was the heir of the Mo family. The insolent people who dared to come here began to trample on the sign with the name of the restaurant. This phenomenon amazed the guy, because he couldn't even imagine that someone could allow such impudence and create such a mess. This caused him genuine rage, and he wanted revenge for such a daring act. Feeling a desire for revenge, he began to act and rushed at one of the hooligans. The main character literally longed for the death of the one who dared to come here and hit him with force. However, it turned out that the stranger was very dexterous and easily dodged the powerful blow. Ting shouted to the hooligans that the Mo family was not easily scared, and no one would leave here unpunished. Suddenly, someone started clapping their hands, saying that indeed, the Mo family is great. The owner of the establishment also came over and remarked that this was indeed an impressive aristocracy. After all, the Mo family always believed that they were helping others, but now their sign was broken and being trampled on. Dissatisfied voices behind the strangers demanded that Tin eliminate these scoundrels, believing that they were entitled to death for their atrocities, and that no one should allow offense to good people. The strangers continued to stand in one place, listening intently to the restaurant owners and the crowd that had gathered behind them. One of the strangers laughed at the phrase that the Mo family was considered kind people. The elderly man began to laugh, realizing that this was far from true. He then became serious and turned to Mr. Mo Hong, asking if he remembered the Huang family in the south of the city. Even if 100 years had passed, they had the right to remove this sign. The old man tensed slightly when he heard this and asked if this really happened in the south of the city. Horror appeared in his eyes, and his fear grew noticeably. The main character didn't care who they were, but if they didn't have a better explanation, they better leave. Suddenly, Mo Hong ordered Ting to shut up. He then approached the guests, declaring that they were honored guests of the Mo family and would be accorded every courtesy. The hero was surprised by this turn of events, because grandfather had never behaved like this before. A descendant of the Huang family asked the young man if he knew the history of their families. 100 years ago, there were two famous cuisines in the city that were very popular. They were awarded royal gold for their skills. In fact, the Mo family lived in the north of the city, and the Huang family's ancestors lived in the south. Their families were friends despite their titles. It was because of these titles that the war between the families began. In the end, the Mo family won, and the Huang family left the country in a shameful defeat, not returning to their homeland for 100 years. Today, a descendant of the Huang family has come here to fulfill his ancestors' promise to challenge the Mo family and restore his honor. The man announced that the Huang family's action had a deep meaning. People realized that the Huang family had suffered a lot from the Mo family. This was the first time Ting had heard this story, and he was shocked by this development. But it was the truth, even though Mo Hong didn't want to admit it. The surprised residents of the city noticed that Mo Hong had aged a lot and looked depressing, but they also realized that both families had suffered in this situation. Everyone understood that these guys were in trouble, and the old man was the president of the Sichuan Cuisine Association. The eyes of the two representatives of the families met, and they closely followed every step. Mo Hong introduced himself as the 27th generation of the Mo family and greeted the new guests, treating them as old friends of his family. The old man wanted his family to give in to the Huang family. This confused the young man even more because he could not believe his grandfather. The elderly man accepted the Huang family's challenge and proposed to settle the feud through a culinary duel, as promised by his ancestors. Representatives from the Huang family asked when they would be ready to fight. The man was impressed by the nobility of the protagonist, but he decided to think about the time. Instantly, he reached his hand towards the tablecloth on the table. Taking off the tablecloth, the man announced that he wanted to start right away. Under the tablecloth there were food and cutlery, and he decided to have a culinary battle right now. This was an impressive turnaround for the Mo family. They didn't even expect such a fight on this day. The elders seemed ready for battle and was willing to do whatever it took to win. The spectators were shocked, believing that the Huang family had already won and had prepared thoroughly. Mo Hong, rolling up his shirt sleeves, noted that the Huang family was also ready to fight. Looking at his grandfather, the young man noticed that he was very tired. But the experienced cook assured that everything was fine, and grandfather still had enough strength to cook. Mr. Huang suggested that they take their time and first agree on the terms and punishment for the losers. After all, you will not only have to give up your ancestral home, but also lose the title of winners in that conflict, and also give up the title of the best in the world. Moreover, if defeated, the entire Mo family would have to kneel. This demand made Ting laugh because every year 8 out of 10 of his grandfather's chefs fail, and Mr. Huang can fail as many times as he wants. Brave Mo Huang accepted the challenge and was ready to fight for his honor and dignity. As expected from respected Mo, this time the representative of the Huang family in the cooking competition will not be Mr. Huang, and his son, Huang Tian, who had been preparing for the competition for many years and was determined to win. Huang Tian is in charge of the kitchen in the Huang family and has a high level of culinary skill. After returning home, he received the highest status of chef. Because of this, Mr. Huang proposed a culinary duel between the heirs of the Huang and Mo families. This turn of events came as a surprise to Mo Huang, as he understood that he was definitely not prepared for this. The main character was amazed that he would have to act as an opponent for the Huang family. His hands were shaking with fear because he was not ready for such a serious fight. Remembering his childhood, at the hospital the doctors diagnosed the child with a rare case of pathology of the forearm skeleton. Compared to ordinary people, he was unable to perform fine movements and had less strength. This disease was incurable, and even though he was the sole heir to the Mo family's culinary arts, modern medicine could not cope with this problem, and culinary arts became impossible for him. At that time, Huang Tian turned to Brother Ting, saying that although he did not know how to fight, but when he prepares, he never loses, not to anyone at all. Once the apple Huang Tian sliced was on the table, something spectacular was about to happen. The apple, skillfully cut, fell into many small particles, as if it had been cut thousands of times to get a beautiful flower. It was a truly skillful gesture for everyone, because not everyone could repeat such a thing. Those watching realized that the apple instantly turned into a flower, and this was the Huang family's magnificent skill, and mastering the blade at such a young age was impressive. At that time, the main character thought that it was a shame when his family's name was trampled on, because no one had seen Mo Ting's culinary abilities before. Huang Tian, following the events, wondered if the Mo family really didn't even have the courage to fight. Not knowing what to say, Tin tried to answer, but could not say a word. Grandfather suddenly exclaimed that the Mo family makes a decision in this situation. Bowing down, he announced that the Mo family was giving up on this situation. The hero was shocked by this turn of events on the part of his grandfather, because he had never seen him give up without a fight before. Those watching realized that the Mo family had surrendered without a fight, and their 100 years of glory had ended, and now they had to endure the shame and kneel down. Even for the Huang family, this was strange, because they did not expect that the heir would be incapable of fighting. Huang Tian also couldn't believe it, because he didn't think he could win without a fight. The elder once again confirmed his admission of defeat and apologized to them, as per the previously agreed upon agreement. The grandson continued to persuade his grandfather, arguing that he should not perform such actions. Continuing to mock, Huang Tian laughed and asked why Ting didn't dare to fight a cooking duel, as if he had no honor. Having realized his defeat, grandfather understood that they were obliged to keep their promises. Despite the bitterness of defeat, Mo Huang had to stick to his obligations. His legs trembled and fear boiled within him as he realized that his reputation was at stake. The spectators were alarmed by this spectacle and found it difficult to believe that the elder would actually kneel before them. The poor old man had not found a worthy heir, and everyone understood that the Mo family had truly lost. Suddenly, Mo Ting declared that he was the 20th generation of the family. And although he does not have the same skill as his grandfather Mo Huang, However, the guy decided to keep his promise and knelt down. For the Huang family, this was a source of joy as they had been waiting a long time to see the Mo family admit defeat. The sight was truly satisfying, even for Huang Tian, although it was unexpected. Turning around and looking at his grandson, the grandfather was shocked by what he saw. Because the representative of the 20th generation of the Mo family, Ting, admitted defeat. But he, Mo Ting, promised that he himself would get rid of the shame of the Mo family. Looking directly into the eyes of his rival, the hero exclaimed that he would erase this shame when it became necessary. And he will take revenge for what the Mo family did, destroying the honor and dignity of his family. Sometime later, events continued to develop in Megapolis. On one of the roofs of a huge building stood a girl who appeared as a result of the earthquake. Smiling, she realized that she had finally smelled the scent of the dragon cook. Immediately, she jumped off the huge building to find him. While the grandfather and grandson were enjoying the meal, Mo Hong was glad that although he had not cooked for a long time, he was still doing a great job. The food was truly impressive and looked very appetizing. The old man begged his grandson to eat while the food was still hot. After that, he was no longer going to try his grandfather's food. At the same time, the hero was not himself and felt simply disgusting. He was filled with rage because he could not tolerate such behavior from the scoundrels who dared to invade their lives. Suddenly, he hit the table with force, expressing his displeasure. And he shouted that he and his grandfather were not ready to put up with these upstarts from the Huang family. The grandson simply could not believe that his grandfather was kicked out of the culinary world. The older man didn't even know what to say and just looked at the food he had prepared. But then he put down his forks and knives, preparing to say something. Smiling, he turned to Tin, saying that his grandfather lived his life without regrets. And he's thrilled that he's over 80 and can still cook delicious food and is happy. Feeling guilty, the hero exclaimed that perhaps if it weren't for him, everything would have been different. The grandfather understood that in any case the grandson should not be blamed for this, since it was not his fault. Mo Hong also asked someone to find out information about that boy, and even if Grandpa was young and strong, he would not be able to defeat him. Usually, when people of their kind retire, they need to pass it on to the next generation, and so the grandfather passed on some kind of box to his grandson. This box was truly unusual, and the guy really wanted to know what was inside. When he opened it, the guy was truly amazed by what he found inside. To the guy's surprise, there was an unknown artifact inside the box. Amused, the grandfather explained that it was a family heirloom, and it was believed that their ancestor, who became a farmer, became a famous culinary master just a few years after he got this thing. When he became the royal chef, they got their plaque. The ancestors claimed that this thing had magical powers, but, despite being passed down from generation to generation, there was no evidence of this. Their rules also state that when the previous generation passes on to a quiet life, this thing is passed on to the next, so it should be kept. This heirloom really impressed the main character. Suddenly, he had a strange feeling, as if he was not worthy of this. Squeezing the medallion tightly until his hands hurt, he shouted that he had no right to own it. Expressing his anger, he hit the table with force and shouted that he could not wield it because of his useless hands. Throwing the medallion, the guy began to leave, realizing that he was very ashamed, and that he needed to correct this situation in any way. After that, he closed the door, leaving grandfather alone in the room. This reaction of the elderly man caused an incredible shock, because he did not expect his grandson to behave this way. With regret, the grandfather understood that his grandson would not just leave this matter, and would see it through to the end. The medallion is a family treasure for a reason. Its transmission from generation to each person is not accidental, after which he becomes a great cook. This medallion has magical powers, which the main character will learn about in the near future. Sometime later, in one of the restaurants, someone was screaming and begging to catch the thief. The cooks were chasing an unknown girl who had entered the kitchen and was trying to steal food. It turned out that this is the same girl who emerged as a result of the earthquake. The angry cooks could not detect the thief and were on guard, not understanding where the girl hid. This was a real shame for them, since the robbery took place during daylight hours, and this girl cleaned out a dozen tables, even taking away the head of a pig. Sometime later, strange events unfolded on one of the roofs of the old buildings. That same girl was standing on the roof, doing something exciting. Around her lay a lot of stolen food from the restaurant. In fact, she feasted on all this booty that she so skillfully stole. And she was even able to dig deep into a pig's head with one bite. Although she understood that this sounded incredible, she then turned to her fourth brother, asking why there were so many people here, and if she didn't find the dragon cook, these scoundrels would simply beat her to death. Patting the wooden dragon, she also asked her brothers not to just stand there, but to actively help her in her search. Suddenly, the girl had a strange feeling, as if someone with magical powers was next to her. She felt the dangerous blade activate and the dragon cook returned, now on Earth. Thanks to her brothers, she headed to the dragon cook in hopes that he would finally feed her. Sometime later, events unfolded in Tina's house. Lying on the bed, he realized that this knife was the legacy of their family and a symbol of hope, and he had to accept it, since he was the only heir of the Mo family and was obliged to continue the family line. Suddenly, someone came through the window and moved incredibly fast. The guy suddenly got out of bed and discovered an intrusion into his room. Realizing that it was probably a burglar, he took out a baseball bat for his and his home's protection. Meanwhile, the unknown girl was already in the kitchen and was eating all the dishes on the table. For his own safety, he prepared to defend himself by reaching for his bat. The girl, tired from eating, sat down on the bed and declared that she intended to sleep, and then take her share in gold coins the next day. This behavior greatly angered Tin. He realized what disrespect was, and the thief was just going to go to bed at his house. Having brushed off the thief, he decided to take revenge on her for her impudence. Raising the baseball bat, he intended to hit the thief on the head. But after the blow, there was a terrible scream, and the guy realized that he had accidentally attacked the girl. Concerned, the grandfather entered the room and turned on the light to understand what was happening. This situation caused a real shock, because no one knew who this girl was and how she was able to get into the house. The girl's head hurt badly after the blow. The worried grandfather also came into play to explain what was happening. This incident caused a real shock, since no one knew who this girl was and how she was able to get into the house. Now the unknown girl had a severe headache after a strong blow. The stunned guy immediately began to apologize, claiming that he did not intend to hit the girl. Annoyed, the girl changed the color of her eyes, and her voice became uncharacteristically harsh, warning the guy that if he hit her, he should say goodbye to his life. Instantly, her hand transformed into a claw with huge claws and attacked the guy. This unusual ability alarmed the protagonist, and he was furious at what he saw. When the girl grabbed the hero, the same medallion instantly peeked out from under his t-shirt. This was noticed by the attacking girl. The hero realized that she had noticed his medallion, and she suddenly stopped. Her hand became human again, and she carefully examined the medallion. Moving closer to Tin, she decided to smell him to determine whether he was a friend or an enemy to her. Suddenly, her mood changed, and she exclaimed that she had finally found the dragon cook. Using her magical abilities, she began to act. Taking the hero by the hand, the strange girl wanted him to go with her. But suddenly, she began to drag him, as if towards a portal through which they teleported. This was indeed the case, because in just a few seconds they found themselves in a completely different place. The worried grandfather did not understand what was happening and wanted to help his grandson, but did not know how. A hand also stuck out of the portal, as if reaching for something. It turned out to be the hand of the same girl who was trying to reach the food. Carrying a plate of chicken with her, she finally said that the work should not be wasted, and we should eat this delicious food. Immediately after this, the portal closed, and no one else would be able to get there. All that was left on the floor was a baseball bat, evidence of a strange incident, and even that was bent from the force of the blow. Worried, Imo Hong could not understand what happened and who this girl was. Not understanding what was happening, the main character continued his teleportation, fearing for his fate. The bright light blinded him, and he tried to cover his face with his hands to avoid blindness. Opening his eyes, he discovered an unknown world in front of him and could not understand what kind of trouble that girl had gotten him into. The place was truly amazing, and the guy had never imagined anything like it. He suddenly realized that things were not going well for him as he began to free fall, but unfortunately he was unable to fly. Closing his eyes, he thought that he was going to die, because he continued to fall, and with every second he sank lower and lower. At that moment the girl asked to whom he was saying all these words. She explained that even if he became a ghost, she had nothing to fear, since she was not afraid of ghosts. Realizing that he was in an upright position, Tin began to panic and beg to let him go. Having asked who this girl was, she replied that she was his ancestor. The guy was so angry that he couldn't believe it, and her words insulted his family, and he asked to let such a respected person like him go. The angry girl did not like this statement, and she hit Tina hard in the face. Finding this guy wasn't easy, and he needed to get back before he was pushed out of this world. Suddenly the girl took the main character by the hood and began to drag him somewhere. From such a flight it became difficult for him to breathe, because the girl strangled him. He literally screamed, asking the girl to act more carefully, otherwise he would die. Realizing that he needed to get out, Tin shouted for his relative to let him go. Suddenly he saw a monster that was nearby, and probably did not want to go down anymore. The cunning lady said that she would release the guy a little later, and they would fly on. As soon as she tried to let go of Tin, he literally grabbed onto her because he didn't want to go down. A fight broke out between them, because the guy understood that if he was released, he would end up as dinner for an unknown creature. When they finally landed on the ground, they found themselves in Tao's house. This place was truly amazing. The smart guy immediately realized that Tao was the middle child of the dragon, known for his appetite. This remark greatly hurt the girl. She could not imagine that she would be called a glutton. After all, she considered herself the goddess of food, and not some kind of glutton. Feeling pain from the click, the guy could not believe his ears when he learned that in front of him was actually Tao. At the same moment, she began to use magical powers, horns appeared on her forehead, and she turned to the revered dragon as her provider. Raising her hand up, magical energy passed through her body, and she ordered the gates of Tao's house to be opened. The sight was impressive, and Tin could not believe his eyes, and he found himself in a completely new world. He became anxious and felt that his life might be coming to an end. Smiling, Tao noticed that this guy had a real touch of stupidity and said that she was the 9th princess from the Dragon Dynasty. She manages the delicacies of the 3 worlds and owns the Tao Palace, being the mistress of the place. As the 9th daughter, she prefers to be called Juzi. Gradually realizing his role in events, the guy finally realized that the presence of dragons, fairies, and other creatures has a purpose. Having revealed the contract, Juzi asked the hero to sign his name as a sign of devotion. However, the hero decided to find out from Juzi what was happening in this place. She didn't want to answer any questions and held the contract up to the guy's face, insisting that he sign it immediately. Realizing that it was not worth signing unknown documents, Tin still sought to find out what was happening here. Soon after, the girl explained that her duties as the goddess of food included ruling over the Linglang space in Tao's house and providing delicious food for the beings of the 3 worlds. The dragon chef, considered the best on earth, had been in oblivion for several years, and yet the last master dragon chef had passed away, and now these people continued to cook her tasteless dishes. It is for this reason that Juicy decided to give the guy a unique chance that could change his life. It was unusual to realize that even gods need to eat, and this girl was in charge of the divine kitchen. But this is far from ordinary cuisine, since the gods will not exchange it for simple cooking. The gods require exquisite food, so the profession of a dragon cook is considered honorable in heaven. Over the years, Juicy, using blackmail, has accumulated many treasures, which are now kept in her palace. Suddenly the girl blushed and asked to forget about it, claiming that she was simply mistaken and there was no blackmail. In any case, if the blade rose, then the cook had to be at his best, and Juicy agreed to these conditions and again offered to sign the contract. While the guy was thinking about how his grandfather cooked food, he was trying to figure out how to explain this whole crazy story of Juicy. Having asked to stop, Tin began to approach the girl to tell her all the details. In response, he did not want to listen to anything and asked to show courage, claiming that the guy was behaving like a wimp. Grabbing his hand, she pressed persistently on the contract to get his print. Thus, the contract was signed, concluding an agreement between them. Immediately after this, Tin exclaimed that it was not he who prepared those dishes. While Juicy no longer heard him, because she was delighted that he had finally signed the contract. The magical contract began to sparkle with a bright light visible throughout the city. Under the influence of the contract, a new building arose, erected in a matter of seconds. The spectacle was truly amazing, which greatly amazed Tin. As soon as the building was built, it instantly disappeared, as if the contract had been abruptly interrupted. This event further confused the couple, who did not even understand why everything happened the way it did. The angry girl demanded an explanation from the damn boy, because Tao's house had completely disappeared. Such statements gave the guy a headache, and he couldn't answer because he didn't know. Juicy knew that with the arrival of a new dragon chef, Tao's house would change depending on the new chef's characteristics and skills, but such a case had never happened before. Angered even more, the goddess began to interrogate the hero, asking how well he could cook, and strictly ordered him not to dare to lie. Repeating his answer, the guy said that it was not he who cooked the food they just ate, but his grandfather, and Juicy brought him here, forced him to sign a contract, but did not even listen to his story. Sighing heavily, the goddess realized that she had indeed made a mistake, since she had brought this guy here without even having a normal conversation with him. Suddenly, a magical glow appeared in front of them again, and someone from afar announced that the task was completed and the dragon cook had returned. Frozen with shame, Juicy understood that now the end would come for her. Because the magic portal said that the dragon's cook had returned, and the 9th daughter should have a feast. Many voices expressed their desire to try the dishes that the dragon chef would prepare. In disbelief, Juicy thought that the only way out of the situation might be to get rid of Ting, since he turned out to be completely incapable. Having collected her thoughts and suppressed her anger, she decided to find out what Tin was capable of in cooking. The alarmed guy could barely answer, admitting that he had never cooked anything before. Bursting with tears, Juicy realized that she had to break up with this loser, otherwise they were destined to die together. At this time, some unidentified creature headed towards them, uttering screams. This unknown creature began to cry, saying that Juicy had finally returned, and the guards of the Eastern Heavenly Gate decided to hold a feast in her honor, demanding a dragon cook. Not knowing what kind of creature it was, the guy still asked who it was. It turned out that his name is Pila. He is the master spirit of the House of Taot, and they will meet often. The spirit was happy to learn that the guy was the dragon's cook and expressed his joy. After thinking for a while, the guy said that he probably really was the dragon's cook, judging by Juicy's words. The joyful spirit realizes that Taot's house has finally been saved and wonders how well the new cook can cook. However, from the reactions of those around him, the spirit felt that something was going wrong. Sometime later, the master spirit of the Juicy house was shocked by the information he had received, and the dragon cook found himself unable to cook. Tin admitted that he didn't want to be the dragon's cook at all, but he was unable to change the situation, since the goddess forcibly brought him here. Jiuzi was outraged by this accusation, pointing to the dragon chef's pendant and denying her guilt. The irritated spirit tried to calm the disputants by inviting them to think about what to do in this situation. The frightened goddess came to the conclusion that only death remained, because this guy did not know how to cook anything decent. Looking at his hands, the hero asked if it was possible to change something. Uni carefully watched Tin's hands, trying to identify what the problem was. In response to this, Jiuzi decided to use her magical abilities to solve the problem. After examining the arm, she noticed that the tendons and veins were faulty, and then it dawned on her that Tin was disabled. The guy was speechless and just continued to stare at his hands, realizing that there was nothing he could do about it. After thinking, the goddess suggested that one heavenly pill would be enough, and however, she decided not to go deeper into this conversation, warning that it was better to forget about it, and she preferred to return the guy to Earth, otherwise he might be torn to pieces if he did not get good food. Suddenly the guy exclaimed, asking them to wait. Approaching the girl closer, he decided to clarify that she was talking about heavenly pills. Turning to the cook, the girl repeated that she was going to return him back to the human world. Feeling very embarrassed, the guy still decided to ask what she was talking about a little earlier. Not understanding what she was talking about, Jiuzi said that his tendons and veins were faulty. Then the guy asked again what exactly she said after that. Not quite understanding, Jiuzi remembered that she had spoken about heavenly pills. Tin was really happy because he wanted to know where he could buy such pills that could cure him. For Jiuzi to get the heavenly pill, but she had already caused him so much trouble that she wasn't sure whether she should look for the pill for him. Using her magical abilities, the girl ordered him to return to her world. She grabbed his clothes so he couldn't escape. Despite Tin's best efforts, he was again not heard and had to go back to the human world. The concerned guy understood that in this situation it was necessary to talk, and there was no point in rushing. Realizing that he had no other choice, Ting began to shout, promising help with provisions for the guards of the Eastern Heavenly Gate. Immediately after this, Jiuzi calmed down and released the alarmed guy. Smiling at him, she asked if the dragon's cook would really help in this difficult matter. Worried about the consequences, Ting confirmed that he would indeed help. After some time, events took place near Tao's new house, which looked more like an eatery. The sight was quite unpleasant, considering that Tao's former home was incredibly beautiful. Very worried, the hero asked how the new look of the house seemed to him. However, the spirit did not take it kindly, believing that it was Ting's fault, and in his view, Tao's house and the dragon cook were inextricably linked, and as great as the dragon cook's food, so is Tao's house. Even the goddess warned the boy that if he failed to complete the task, then her anger would not pass. With a witty response, Ting announced that although he didn't cook in their world, in his world he had no problem with traditional cuisine. Looking at the skinny guy, the girl could hardly believe his words, especially considering his hands. Looking at his hands, the hero exclaimed, declaring that he knew many dishes that did not necessarily require the use of hands. Upon entering Tao's house, the spirit wanted to give a tour, but the guy realized that it was just a small shop, and the tour would be unnecessary. Pointing to the cabinet, the spirit explained that Tao's house is a unique artifact of the three worlds, and the treasure is located right inside this cabinet. Assuming it was an ordinary locker, Tin reached over to open it and see what was in there. Immediately after opening the cabinet, strange smoke began to emerge from it. Smoke instantly filled the entire room, preventing the hero from opening his eyes. When he was able to do this, he saw something amazing. The guy found himself in the royal garden, where all kinds of birds and animals from the three worlds lived. The spectacle was truly amazing, since the garden turned out to be of incredible size. However, for the spirit this was nonsense, because the previous royal garden was thousands of times larger. Then came the garden of 1,000 herbs, where plants grew right in the sky. young space nearby, and if a dragon chef cooked one dish here, it would be able to reproduce it countless times. In another room, there was a warehouse of storage vessels, from which an incredibly wonderful aroma emanated. Looking at Tin, the spirit decided to explain that only the dragon's cook has the necessary skills, and one should not rely on them, because their interference in the process will only make the dishes tasteless. Catching glances, they realized that it was time to start cooking. After all, at the moment, the honor of the dragon chef depends on Ting. Having cast a magic spell, the spirit began to move the main character back to the starting point. That is, to Tao's house, where they were previously. This house was now officially his home, and since he claimed to be able to cook without his hands, Juzi decided to test his claims. Remembering various recipes, the hero thought about what exactly to cook. The next moment he came up with an idea that he decided to bring to life. Immediately declaring that he knew what to do and how to cook, he set to work. After some time, events unfolded during a fight with a huge rooster spewing flames from its beak. The hero tried his best to escape from the giant rooster, not expecting it to be so huge. Juzi and the spirit were simply enjoying the scene as the chef avoided his own ingredient. The rooster was impressive in size and looked like a monster from some movie. Tin tried to escape from the colossal rooster through the forest, fearing that he would not be able to cook it. The protagonist's team was clearly not ready to help him, believing that the chef should cope with his own ingredients. It was actually just a regular fire chicken. All generations of dragon chefs with a knife in their hand could get any ingredient, and it would be a shame for the previous generations to see Ting. The angry guy said that if he failed, he would be punished, and Juzi would also face difficulties. The girl clearly did not like such threats, because only he could cope here, and no help was expected from them. This was true, but the smart guy realized that he would cook and Juzi could help kill the bird. As it turned out, this was not a problem, since the dragon's cooks had many servants ready to help with the ingredients, the spirit explained. The goddess, becoming even more angry, shouted that no one had the right to force her to help in such matters. But there was no time to waste, because the rooster was already very close and ready to attack. Luckily, with just one spell, Juzi dealt with this giant beast with ease. Using a single spell, the goddess took the life of a giant rooster. The smart guy was glad that he had such a devoted assistant as Juzi. After thinking for a while, Ting asked the spirit to prepare some spices for him, and Juzi was to help with the other one to dig up some dirt. The goddess did not like this request at all, because she could not imagine that she would have to do such physical work. Turning to the girl, the hero suggested that she might not have heard, and again asked her to dig up the dirt, the same one that everyone played with in childhood. Feeling intense anger, Juzi exclaimed that no one has the right to force her to dig up dirt, and Ting apparently does not value her life. Continuing his excuses, the hero explained that his hands are not designed for such work, which is why he asks for help, and while the spirit began to persuade the girl, saying that they are her only hope, and she must come to terms with this. Sometime later, events continued to unfold in Tao's house, where a spirit named Pua had already brought all the necessary ingredients. There were a huge number of them, and each of them was needed to create just one dish. Among the ingredients on the table were excellent chicken breast, outstanding wine, a variety of seasonings, dirt, flowers, and fruits. Now everything depended on the main character, because they supported him as best they could. Turning around and looking at Juzi, Ting saw a terrible creature in front of him, who looked at him as if he was ready to kill. The calm girl responded by asking him not to talk nonsense, as she wanted to see how this guy cooks. Smiling, the guy exclaimed that then it was time to start. The preparation process began, and the first step was to discover the excellent wine. This amazing wine was about 500 years old, but it was poured straight into the dirt. It turned out that this was the recipe, and Tin realized that now it was time to start eating meat. Carrying one of the seasonings, he actively began to cook. While marinating the chicken, he stuffed it with seasonings provided by the spirit. For viewers who don't know much about cooking, it seemed miraculous and difficult to understand. Once the chicken was infused with spices, Tin immediately began sprinkling dirt on top. According to observers, it looked simply disgusting, and they began to wonder if the dragon's cook knew what he was doing. Although Tin could not use his hands, knife, or even a spatula to prepare food, he found other ways and waited for the dish to cook. If those present could not or would not help, then at least they should have refrained from interfering. Sometime later the dish was almost ready, and the rooster was completely covered in dirt. Concerned, Tout turned around and stated that it didn't even look appetizing, and she didn't want to deal with it since she could die from eating it. Even the spirit felt an urgent need to visit the toilet, so he suggested leaving the protagonist alone for a while. Suddenly, Tin jumped up and told the ghost that as a chef, it was impossible for him to do without his help, so he ordered him not to leave. Having grabbed the ghost, the guy began to give him instructions on what to do next. Namely, it was necessary to thoroughly warm up this substance, and then the house of Tout could be opened. The spirit had to make every effort not to let Juzi down. Using his magical abilities, the ghost began to magically heat up the combination of mud and rooster. The sight was truly impressive, and Tin could not take his eyes off it. The entire prepared dragon cook mixture began to burn, taking on a deep black hue. Looking at the spirit, the guy remembered that they really had a lot of guests, and so he wanted to know something important. Namely, he wanted to know how much it would cost to prepare this dish. The caring spirit was quick to explain that he does not need money for this process, and all services are provided free of charge. Paul also wanted to hand over the magic crystal, which was left by the last dragon cook. The crystal was really impressive, and Ting wanted to know if it was somehow connected to the House of Tout. Immortals who want to eat must pay with crystals, which are the currency in this world. This crystal serves as the key to activating the restaurant function. Suddenly Pa started shouting that if Tin had done something worthwhile, he would have given him the crystal, but using it for something insignificant would be stupid. The guy clearly didn't like this behavior on the part of the assistant, and he asked him to shut up, as he was talking too much. Despite the ghost's doubts that the guy would be able to cook something valuable, he decided to demonstrate his skills. Immediately after this, Ting decided to put the crystal in the locker to activate the food's multiplication ability. The entire room was illuminated with a bright light, visible at a distance of 1,000 meters. The process of food reproduction was truly impressive, and the hero looked at it without taking his eyes off. The unusual dish began to glow with a bright light, gradually multiplying with the help of magical abilities. The process of duplicating the food proceeded, and the mud ball was enveloped in flames. After this, the cooked food began to quickly rotate around its axis, surprising Tin. Columns of smoke began to rise upward, accompanied by strange explosions in the air. Immediately after this, a huge amount of prepared food was in the air, which seemed incredible. Ghostly hands began to appear from space, starting to prepare food. The spirit explained that the Tout house can not only replicate ingredients, but also replicate cooking techniques, and these ghostly hands will copy the main character. At the end of the cooking process, only the last ingredient remained. Namely, spices that were poured directly onto the dirt. This caused Poe to be outraged as he saw that all the spices had been poured directly onto the lump of dirt. Suddenly, Tin clapped his hands, signaling that the dish was ready. What he saw upset the ghost even more, because he could not understand how he could eat such a dish. He began to cry, realizing that such a person could not be trusted. The prepared dish resembled stones rather than tasty chicken. Realizing that this was the end, the spirit began to pack his things, realizing that because of this, Tout's house would be destroyed. Suddenly, a bright light appeared in the sky, as if a portal was opening for someone to pass through. Looking up, the guy also didn't understand what was happening here. The clouds began to disperse, and it became known that the guests were very close. The guards, having descended from heaven, found themselves incredibly hungry and were glad that Tao's house was finally open. The alarmed spirit began to panic and screamed at the guy to let Juzi bring him back to Earth, otherwise he would become a dead man. Smiling, the hero did not even understand what the ghost was talking about. The best wine and delicious food were supposed to make the guest's stay in Tao's house pleasant, and he began to invite dear guests. The divine guests gradually descended from heaven and landed on Earth. The armored guards were very serious, thinking that they would be able to enjoy the magnificent dishes. However, after looking at these dishes, they could not understand how they could eat these coal balls, since they had to travel too long. The guards really didn't like the dishes, and they began to think it was some kind of joke. The worried ghost began to make excuses, saying that they had encountered difficulties, which is why they were unable to prepare decent dishes. The enraged guard did not like this, since they are responsible for guarding the 4 gates and maintaining order in the heavenly space, and he could not understand why the House of Tao was unable to complete its task. For decades they said that the dragon chef had not yet appeared, and they endured it. But now that the dragon chef has returned to his place, they are greeted in this way. If the brothers are not satisfied now, there will be no choice but to demolish Tao's house. With deep concern, the ghost tried to calm them down, declaring that they should not irritate the lords, because they might appear again tomorrow, giving them a few moments of peace. Suddenly, someone exclaimed in front of the heavenly warriors, expressing joy at their presence in Tao's house. This was very disturbing, as he warned the fool not to stick his head out. As it turned out, it was the main character who realized that the guest had arrived, but the ghost did not let them through, which was wrong. As he approached, he accidentally tripped over a stone. Because of his clumsiness, he immediately fell, ingloriously disgracing himself in front of the guests. The guards immediately leaned towards the guy, wanting to know who he was. Feeling very awkward, the guy, a little embarrassed, replied that he was the dragon's cook. This came as a surprise to the guards, as a dragon cook usually doesn't look as inexperienced as he is. However, the guy decided to destroy this stereotype, explaining that young people can also have the status of a dragon. Among the 3 realms, the heavenly realm plays a key role, and the immortals here make the most important decisions, and everything is subject to their power, with the exception of the culinary arts, which is why the dragon chef is chosen from the human realm, where cooking flourishes. Although the immortals have no cooking skills, they realize that the art of cooking at the highest level requires many years of practice, and the guy is too young to be a true dragon chef. Suddenly, one of the guards intended to punish the guy for his lies. The frightened young man did not know what to do, but fortunately Juzi was nearby and eager to help. With great speed, she approached Tin to help him out of a difficult situation. Showing maximum dexterity, the girl instantly found herself close to the scene of the incident. Having struck the guard, she saved the hero from danger. The guy was truly relieved that his savior, Juzi, had finally come to the rescue. Such aggressive behavior on the part of the guards greatly angered the girl, and she ordered them not to dare fight on her territory. Immediately, the guards fell to the ground and began to apologize to the respected Juzi. The head guard remained steadfast and was outraged that the boy was claiming to be the dragon's cook, as if he was trying to deceive them. Looking at the head guard, Juzi said that she had found him herself, and then asked if they really wanted to argue with her. They obviously didn't want to argue, considering how strong the goddess was compared to them. Ultimately, the guards calmed down and decided that a compromise had to be found in this situation. The frightened men decided it was best to leave to avoid possible trouble. The hero was clearly not happy with this outcome of events, and he asked the guards to stop, but no one understood why he was trying to do this, since such behavior could cause serious trouble. Hearing the guy, the head guard turned around to listen to what he had to say. To demonstrate his dish, the hero decided to take out the stick that was next to him, and he threw it aside, performing an unusual trick. It turned out that the wooden stick fell into the dish that he had previously prepared. Gradually, the mud ball began to crack and the dish began to leak out of it. A bright light penetrated through the cracks that had just formed in the ball of mud. The sight was truly amazing as chicken feathers began to emerge from the mud. The hero was sure that the guards would like the dish he had prepared for them. What they saw literally blinded them, and everyone tried to close their eyes to avoid possible harm. A ready-made and very appetizing chicken emerged from the mud ball, clearly ready for consumption. Seeing this, all the guards were fascinated, because the chicken looked very tasty, and the smell from it was simply amazing. Even the spirit along with Juicy began to feel the very pleasant aroma that emanated from the fully cooked dish. The smart guy decided to invite his guests, inviting them to enjoy the dish while it was still hot. The first girl to decide to try it was a girl, and she broke off a small piece of chicken. Slightly embarrassed, she first put her nose to the chicken before eating it. However, as soon as a piece of this delicious chicken entered her mouth, she decided to thoroughly savor every moment. The worried guards sought to find out from the venerable Juicy what the taste of this dish was. Instantly, Juicy blushed and her expression suddenly changed, as if she was enjoying maximum pleasure. The joyful girl exclaimed that this dish was truly delicious and incredibly tasty. The guards, also unable to endure hunger any longer, began to gobble up everything they could get their hands on. While they were enjoying the food, it became clear to them that the taste was gradually revealing new shades, and the dish was truly magnificent. Everyone immediately realized that this guy was a true master of dragon cooking. Confused, Juicy asked the boy what kind of dish it was. After coming up with a name, Ting exclaimed that this dish is called heavenly chicken. The chicken is usually steamed, baked, or fried, which gives the dish incredible flavor. However, the heavenly chicken is cooked without feathering or butchering, then sealed in wet clay. The spices and mushrooms inside the chicken create an assortment of flavors. The whole thing is simmered slowly over coals, but the flavor and broth remain inside, remaining unnoticeable to the layman. After opening the clay shell, the chicken feathers fall out on their own, giving the dish a richer aroma and taste compared to other dishes. This earthly umami recipe seems to have been inspired by heaven itself, which is why the dish is called heavenly chicken. All the guards began to praise the guy, claiming that the dish was truly magical and the chicken was beautiful, and thereby they admitted their mistake. Now they had no doubts, and they also wanted to congratulate Juicy for opening Taodai House and bringing back the dragon chef. Spirit Poo announced that Tao's house was now open to the public. Looking at this guy, Juicy knew that he deserved such praise. While the hero was thinking about his next step, carefully considering its details, the next step was to ask Juicy for heavenly pills to heal his hands. After some time, evening came, and events continued in the heavenly kingdom. Juicy and Purr were delighted with some event, admiring something very bright. There was a giant crystal in front of them, and they could not believe that the number 10 million was displayed on it. The hero still did not understand anything and tried to find out what the object in front of him was and what this number meant. It turns out that this is a crystal used to record profits in the Taod house, and 10,000 is the number of chicken sold today, and some leave ratings and comments. Not understanding what was happening, the guy was shocked and wanted to know what comments were left by those who tried his dishes. To see all comments, you had to drag the slider down. The spirit decided to do this and pulled the slider down to read the comments. There are many legendary personalities in the comments who really liked the dish from the House of Taod and wanted to try even more different dishes. This was a real challenge for Tin because he could not imagine that so many people would try his food in one day. In any case, he is now a dragon chef, not just an ordinary person, and he should show at least a little interest, Juicy said. She predicted that he would become a celebrity, and it was time to seriously think about his next dish. Raising his hands, the skilled guy exclaimed that it seemed like his little sister had forgotten something. Pretending not to understand, the girl wanted to find out what exactly she might have forgotten. Meeting the girl's gaze, the hero exclaimed that she forgot about the heavenly pills, as if trying to trick him. Laughing at this suggestion, The girl asked the spirit to bring her jar of snacks. Instantly, the phantom appeared with an unusual jar containing various snacks. Handing the guy one of the unusual candies, the kind spirit gave it to him. Tin couldn't imagine how this candy could actually cure him. Juzi realized that the average person was still underestimating the Taoed house, and they should take this pill, as after this they would have another advantage. As the spirit flew closer, he decided to explain that Juzi was a famous businesswoman in heaven. Continuing to look at the tablet, the hero could not understand how it could calm him down. Meanwhile, events continued in the real world. Imo Hong's upset grandfather sat alone, waiting for his grandson to finally come and visit him. Sighing heavily, the old man could not understand where Tin was. Remembering past events, he began to think about how his teleportation occurred, after which he disappeared. At that very moment, someone behind him turned to grandfather. However, when he turned around, the old man saw no one at all, as if everything had just seemed to him. Realizing that it was just his imagination, he sighed heavily, realizing that he might never see his grandson again. Once again, someone exclaimed that grandfather was here, and the voice seemed to be coming from afar. Suddenly, a portal appeared very close to Imo Hong, from which someone was about to appear. And it really happened. The joyful grandson exclaimed that it was him, Imo Ting. This event really made the grandfather happy, and he wanted to find out from his grandson where he had been all this time and when he would return to the ordinary world. Unfortunately, the guy could not yet say when he would return, but asked not to worry because he also liked it in the heavenly world. Having shed a stingy manly tear, the grandfather asked him to promise him that he would not expose himself to danger and everything would be fine. Patting his grandson on the cheek, Imo Hong was very glad that he was okay. The joyful guy decided to show his grandfather something new because changes had occurred in him. Taking an apple out of his pocket, he wanted to demonstrate a trick that had failed him for so long. First, he decided to throw an apple to demonstrate his idea. Then, from another pocket, he pulled out a blade with which he needed to perform one very important action. Focusing on the apple, the guy was about to perform the same trick that his sworn enemy had previously done. Starting to cry, the grandfather could not believe his eyes, realizing that his grandson had really been healed. Recalling the events of the past, the doctor explained that this child had neurological and muscular problems in both hands, but he asked not to worry, because this would not affect his health, just fine motor skills in his hands would not develop. Even when the boy was a child, he was asked what he wanted to become, and he answered that he wanted to be a cook, like his grandfather. As he grew older, his grandfather asked him not to play with knives and to be obedient. Because due to poor hand motor skills, the boy could not hold a knife normally. Then Imo Hong forbade him to touch the knife because he was not capable of wielding it. Remembering these words, Tin began to act, and in front of him was the very apple with which it was necessary to accomplish his plan. With a feeling of new strength in his hands, the main character continued to perform a difficult trick while experiencing unusual impressions. The healed hand now obeyed him as if never before, allowing him to confidently hold the knife. By making many tiny cuts on the apple flying in the air, Tin demonstrated his skill. Even though he kept his hand under strict control, he performed the difficult trick with ease. Suddenly a strange feeling came over him, and Tin thought that something had gone wrong. The apple slipped off the knife and began to slowly fall to the floor. Not understanding what was happening, grandfather continued to closely monitor the apple, waiting for a fascinating trick. Picking up the apple, the guy only caused his grandfather to laugh cheerfully. He felt very fatigued from the strenuous activity as he had yet to get used to using his hands, but his desire to train for success remained constant. Looking at the opened portal, Tin realized that it was time to return to the heavenly kingdom. Trembling with excitement, grandfather stood motionless, barely comprehending what was happening. The grandson nevertheless decided to say goodbye, announcing that time was running out and it was time for him to go. However, turning around, the guy promised that when he returned, he would prepare the most delicious dinner for them. As he began his teleportation, Tin asked his grandfather not to worry about him and wished him good luck. A few seconds later, the portal to the heavenly realm closed, and grandfather could not believe his eyes. While he continued to cry, he truly rejoiced that his grandson seemed to have finally been healed. So, looking at the sky, grandfather realized that now he no longer needed to worry about it. The old man was sincerely happy with the changes, realizing that new prospects were opening up for his descendant. After some time, events continued in the heavenly kingdom. The majestic nature continued to impress with its beauty and grandeur. At this time, someone was enjoying a delicious meal on the lawn. This person was Juicy, and her satisfaction from the good dinner was obvious. The spirit sitting next to him continued to dine, enjoying the taste of chicken. The feeling of satiety brought them pleasure, and the overall pleasure from the company multiplied. Suddenly, the spirit noticed something amazing happening nearby. Someone was training intensively under a huge waterfall. It was Tin who trained with great diligence, holding water on his blade, trying to become stronger. His arms were in pain, but he overcame it, despite the tears, continuing to train to achieve the goal. Even while crying in pain, he realized that he needed to continue training without stopping. Finally, his strength left him and he fell into the water, struggling with the difficulty of continuing his training. Fearing for Tin, the spirit noticed that he began to drown after falling into the water. However, the hero was conscious and skillfully swam underwater with a giant blade. With a fiery gaze, like a fish, he surfaced from the water, holding his weapon. Continuing his training, the hero again took the blade in his hands and began to act. With incredible effort, he held the flow of water with his blade using his hands. The expression on his face was that of a mysterious man, conquering the feeling of pain in the pursuit of success. The spirit again began to worry about the hero, drawing the attention of Juicy, and said that Ting was behaving inappropriately and he needed help. Then the girl explained that she had done everything possible to heal his hands, and that Tin was independently striving to improve her skills. Despite the deliciousness of the heavenly chicken, Juicy stressed that she needs to update the menu to maintain the variety of dishes and attract customers. The guy turned out to be a valuable acquisition for Juicy, despite all the difficulties. In order to provide Mo Ting with more time for training, they moved to Tay Space, where the nature of the flow of time is different, and this, by the way, is expensive. Time here almost stands still. A year in Tay Space is equal to only a minute in the outside world. The merchant explained to her that Taya's space could only be rented for a week, and if she needed it for a longer period, she would have to pay with treasures. With tears in her eyes, the girl realized that this old pig had robbed her of all the jewelry she had earned over all these years. Coming closer, the hero put his hand on her shoulder and asked her not to worry. After all, he was not going to let her down, and when his hands were in order, the restaurant would be even better than before. The spirit asked Tin to immediately take a break as soon as he got tired, but the guy was so dedicated that he was only going to have a snack before continuing his training. Sighing heavily, as if nothing had happened, he began to eat the apple. But at that same second, a strange cloudiness flashed in his eyes, due to which he gradually lost the clarity of his mind. His legs began to give way, and Tin dropped the apple he was holding in his hand. It turned out that he ultimately couldn't handle such intense training and had to take a break. Still, Juicy realized that this guy does not have outstanding talents, but he is trying hard. But, unfortunately, at the moment he has no time to rest. That is why the goddess decided to use her magic to help the young man. Using her magical abilities, she gradually returned the guy to consciousness so that he could train again. The magic really worked, and with every second the main character became better, his condition returned to normal. Gradually, he began to open his eyes, and Jiuzi and Pum monitored him to prevent his condition from worsening. The worried guy looked around and thought that he seemed to have slept for 2 whole days. The girl told him to continue practicing with his sword because this way he would be able to handle a kitchen knife more easily. Training resumed at the waterfall, with large amounts of water flowing down the rocks. The entire flow of water was directed literally to one point, where the main character stood. At an unexpected moment, one of the stone blocks began to fall towards the guy, causing Jiuzi to cry out, calling for caution. In fact, when the rock fell on him, he easily absorbed the impact as his arms became noticeably stronger. The brave guy confidently stated that he should behave more quietly, since there was nothing wrong with him, and he successfully dealt with this blow. This really impressed the spirit, as the guy rapidly continued his development. However, the training was not over yet, and Tin sought to achieve even more impressive results. With deft movements, he slowly moved towards the massive boulder. And, using all his strength, he hit the stone directly, breaking it into many small fragments. The spectacle is truly amazing, and the spirit rated his performance top-notch. The hero actually liked this feeling, because he believed that his strength was unmatched. Suddenly, someone from behind threw a gnawed chicken bone at him. It turned out that it was Jiuzi. She didn't like the whole show. The girl was literally seething with rage and told the guy not to be too happy, as these were just small things, and he should continue training, otherwise he would not get anything to eat. Sometime later, the hero finally decided to take a short rest because he was simply suffering from hunger. The hungry guy really liked Jiuzi's cooking and wanted to try even more dishes, but the goddess did not want to waste time and asked Tina to give her amulet. Raising his eyebrows in bewilderment, the guy began to remove the amulet from his neck. It occurred to him that perhaps the goddess was going to give him a new sword to practice with, although, in fact, the time has come for the appearance of the knife. For Tin, who appeared out of the blue, this was truly surprising, but he was looking forward to seeing this very knife. Using her magical powers, the goddess began to summon a knife intended for the dragon's cook. The sharpest knife in this world is for the great chef. The family heirloom gradually turns into an incredible knife with amazing properties. A magical artifact changes its appearance under the influence of magic. A pillar for many thousands of kilometers is visible, which arose due to the created portal. The goddess and the spirit watched, impressed by what was happening. The hero, not understanding what was happening, closed his eyes because the light was too bright. A giant knife instantly flashed through the clouds, beginning its fall to the ground. The guy, barely opening his eyes, noticed that the knife was heading straight at him. A column of horror filled him, as he did not understand what was happening and why such a huge knife was needed. An ordinary person could not even imagine that this was exactly the same knife, and it was not so easy to use it. The spirit calmed the boy, explaining that this was the sharpest knife, a great relic, and it could be used by touch. The guy was confused and had no idea that to transform the knife you need to touch it. It turned out that the dangerous knife appeared long before the formation of the 3 worlds, becoming a symbol of culinary art. The spirit warned that one must be very careful when using the knife. The ungrateful boy did not listen to the spirit and rushed to the knife, counting on ease. Touching it, he began to imagine the desired cooking knife. At first, Tin looked at different knife shapes, realizing that a cleaver was not an option. The shape of the katana was also inappropriate, as it would cut hands rather than food. Even the pirate's favorite knife didn't measure up, despite his childhood affection for it. Ultimately, he had to calm down and carefully consider what kind of knife he wanted to cook with, taking into account each stage of cooking. Remembering the past, the guy began to imagine the knife that his grandfather used. He remembered the cleaver, with the help of which Mo Hong prepared magnificent culinary masterpieces. Then it dawned on the main character that he would like to have the same knife as his grandfather. It turned out that this knife is called Wunwu, and a skilled cook should be able to use it skillfully. Although this knife looked ordinary, it was possible to perform miracles with its help, and it was not so easy to master it right away, and an experienced chef, wielding this knife, created real culinary works. At that moment, the hero exclaimed that the Wanwu knife was exactly what he needed. As soon as this was said, the giant knife instantly disappeared from sight. The excited guy began to look around in search of the knife he had so dreamed of. Suddenly, something unusual came into his field of vision. Namely, the Wanwu knife itself, which he so badly desired. The joyful guy exclaimed in front of Juzi and Pur, informing them that he was able to transform the knife into the desired shape. In delight, he asked what he should do now. It turned out that the performance was about to begin, and Tin would need to defend himself, be attentive and careful. Not understanding what was happening, the guy clarified why he needed to be careful. But, looking at the knife, a strange feeling began to awaken in him, as if the knife was trying to slip out of his hand. After this, the giant cleaver began to sparkle and emit magical rays. The power of the knife turned out to be impressive, and the hero could hardly control it. The knife literally began to control the hero, rising into the air and taking its owner with it. Immediately after this, an explosion of incredible proportions occurred due to the release of magic. Meanwhile, Juzi and the spirit continued to monitor everything that was happening and were slightly alarmed, worried about the guy. For after such a powerful explosion, only a trace on the ground remained of an ordinary person. Looking up, the girl knew that this guy was somewhere upstairs now, and this was confirmed, since the magic knife raised him to a great height, as if he wanted to show something. Sometime later, Tin came to his senses, still holding the knife in his hands. It was difficult to understand what was happening, but the guy was covered in bruises. The excited girl ran up, not understanding why he even touched the knife without obeying the spirit. Considering that Tin almost died, he exclaimed that he needed to rest at least a little. Because of this, he gradually began to let go of the knife that was in both hands. It turned out that as soon as the hero let go of the knife, he would immediately lose the ability to control it, so it was impossible to let him go. Frightened, he squeezed the knife tighter, because he didn't want to lose it. As soon as he touched the knife, the taming process began, and letting it go now would mean giving up and all his efforts would be in vain. Juzi explained that taming a knife is a test of will and patience that will last 10 days, and after that he will be able to control this knife perfectly. The angry guy didn't understand why he wasn't told about this earlier, but now he had an incentive and he only needed to hold out for 10 days. The girl also warned that the strength of the knife would change, so you need to be more careful. At that same second, the knife was activated again and glowed with a bright light, as if emitting magic. Realizing that he needed to hold on, the hero understood that the competition with the knife had begun again. The knife hit its owner with force on the forehead, forming a giant lump. Friends immediately noticed that the guy was still conscious and ready to continue taming the knife. The brave guy exclaimed that he was not as simple as the knife thought, and ordered him to attack to repel the attack. On the second day, the sight was even worse, because the knife controlled the guy in such a way that he was thrown from side to side and hit the trees. On the third day, events became even more terrible, because the knife wanted to fly up with its owner and pierce an entire rock. The sight was truly shameful, and Ting was humiliated. Sometime later, the trials came to an end, and the main character was wounded and beaten, but continued to hold on. Although the guy was dying, he still held the knife with both hands. It turned out that it was the 10th day, and the poor fellow was literally tortured to death. Anxious, Juzi finally realized that the 10th day had already arrived. Then she asked Tin if he was holding a knife, because the tests were already nearing the end. The main character had a vision in which there was a strange glowing gaze, closely watching him. After this, the unknown person exclaimed to him to wake up. Having opened his eyes, the man did not understand who was talking to him and who was addressing him. The mysterious creature laughed at the guy's reaction and continued to watch him closely. The teeth of this creature were huge and capable of swallowing a person in literally one bite. For a guy who had never seen anything like this before, this sight was truly impressive. It turned out that there was a giant dragon standing in front of Mo Ting, watching him closely. Looking at his hand, the guy wondered if he had already let go of the knife, and if he had passed this test. Suddenly the dragon turned to him, asking if he was really the guy who was trying to control him. The stunned boy at first did not understand the question, but then realized that this dragon was that same knife. The dragon again insisted that the mere mortal give up and not suffer anymore. After all, if he turns to the dragon with a request, perhaps the latter will transfer part of his power to him, making the main character an outstanding dragon cook. All this without requiring control of the dragon itself to gain some of its power. Laughing, the golden dragon asked the guy if he was ready for this, since he wouldn't tell anyone. The confident young man firmly stated that he did not want this. This answer really shocked the dragon, because he did not expect that an ordinary mortal could refuse such an offer. Tin explained that his friends told him he needed to pass this test. As his grandfather said, a cook is not a true cook unless he is able to control his own tools, and now, with this knife in his hands, he must master it completely. This answer angered the dragon, because the words were loud and mortals, so greedy and stupid, always strive for power that does not belong to them. Suddenly the dragon opened his mouth, revealing a magic sphere, and said that this was it. The agitated man continued to watch, not understanding what was happening. Right now the dragon wanted to show an ordinary mortal the taste of death. A bright light began to rain down on Tin, surrounding his body and creating an explosion of incredible proportions. Standing in a daze, the guy simply awaited his fate, not knowing what to do in such a situation. The explosion destroyed everything nearby. The protagonist's comrades noticed something surprising. Tin began to come to life, holding the knife in his hands despite the explosion. Experiencing pain and overcoming fear, he was still able to survive. The spirit was worried that the hero might go crazy like one of the dragon's cooks earlier. Jiuzi was determined and confident that this would not happen. Deciding to help the guy, the girl began to use her magical abilities. Touching the head of the victim, the goddess used all her power to restore the mind and body of the young man. The sight was amazing, and the spirit was delighted. Because it was the secret magic known as verbal flow that Jiuzi exchanged with Ting. Having opened his eyes, the unsuspecting guy could not understand what was happening here. His body began to literally disintegrate before the eyes of the golden dragon, who rejoiced that this had happened. According to the mysterious creature, this was just the beginning. The next test was already prepared, and the unknown device began to descend to the floor. It turned out that it was a cauldron of boiling oil that was approaching the main character. There was really boiling oil inside, incredibly hot. Laughing, the dragon asked the guy to think again and reflect before it's too late. Otherwise, a rain of hot oil awaits him. Experiencing severe pain, the guy continued to hold on, screaming in anger. However, he knew that he couldn't give up, couldn't tell the dragon that he wasn't ready to go through with it. The boiler with boiling oil began to tip over. Oil gushed out of it. A huge waterfall of boiling oil fell on the body of an ordinary person. The pain was hellish, and Tin tried to hold on until the last, enduring the agony in order to complete what he started. Suddenly, he heard Jiuzi's voice begging him not to give up, to hold on until the end. The girl knew what he was going through, but she needed to be reminded that this was just a test, and what was happening was an illusion, not to be confused with reality. Due to the need to find a way out and hold on until the end, the goddess believed that he could complete the test. Looking at the dragon, the guy realized that this was all an illusion, and he needed to find a way out. The golden dragon was amazed that the guy didn't give up, because there was nothing wrong with it, and it was time to give in. The next test involved 1,000 knives piercing the main character's body. A huge number of blades were floating in the air, trying to penetrate the body of an innocent person. The enraged dragon exclaimed that man could not defeat him and would turn him into mincemeat. Realizing that there was no other way out, Tin continued to stand in place, wondering what to do next. Blades flew before his eyes, trying to hit his body. A multitude of daggers rained down on him, making the test literally impossible to pass as they tormented his body, preventing him from doing anything other than standing still. Suddenly, we return to events that occurred earlier in the life of the main character. He recalled how his grandfather cooked in the kitchen and taught him the culinary arts. The top chef told Tin that it is important to control the heat when grilling meat. And suddenly the grandfather noticed that the baby was reading something in the kitchen. It turned out that these were notes from 3 chefs from Zhejiang, and the book contained cool knife techniques. The little boy was actually inspired by the thought that perhaps one day he would be able to cook as skillfully as his grandfather. The baby knives were impressive and really cool. Unfortunately, the elderly man understood that due to a hand disease that arose after his birth, the boy would not be able to handle knives. All the knives he picked up had previously fallen out of them. After this, we are transported into the thoughts of the main character, where he managed to throw away all the knives flying at him and survive the attack of 1,000 blades. This was a truly impressive decision for the dragon, as he had never seen anything like it. The brave warrior continued to stand in place, without moving, and thought about how to win in this confrontation. Opening his eyes completely, he looked into the eyes of the golden dragon. Immediately after this, an explosion of incredible proportions occurred, caused by the clash of their views. In an instant they were on the water, standing, watching each other carefully. The indignant dragon asked how an ordinary person could destroy his illusion. It was obvious to the guy that it was an illusion, and he could not harm the dragon, and what he felt was only a deception of consciousness, and the dragon did not seek to kill him. It was more like cooking lessons. The tests had their own logic, and hot oil, flame, cooking, blade, heating, and when he mentioned minced meat, the hero realized that this was just a normal cooking process. He just became part of this main dish. Not understanding anything, the dragon objected, but even if he understood, fear was an integral part of the test. The fire, the hot oil, the blade, it was all very painful, but he realized that it was all part of cooking, and every second of cooking required incredible concentration, and it was important to enjoy the process without thinking about anything else. Crossing his arms, the noble hero decided to thank the dragon, saying that these feelings were truly indescribable. Laughing, the golden dragon exclaimed that it was his great love for cooking that helped him. This ordinary youth was a completely stupid child in the dragon's opinion. But, realizing his loss, the dragon admitted that the test had been successfully completed. Feeling the taste of victory, Tin was truly happy that he succeeded. After this, the dragon asked the guy if he was ready to control his sharpest knife, which would now be completely at his disposal. Suddenly, with a heavy sigh, it turned out that the young man was not satisfied. Because he wanted to discuss the issue of control a little later, and he wanted to remember the impressive test with 1,000 knives, so he invited the dragon to repeat it again. The golden dragon was truly shocked by this proposal, as he could not understand what was wrong with this guy. The indignant dragon decided that his master was crazy, and yet the young man insisted on his own, telling the dragon to continue the test. Meanwhile, Jiuzi was very angry and wanted to end this quickly. Because of this, she even began to pinch the main character, hoping that he would wake up. Continuing to wake him up, the girl asked if his message had reached her and ordered him to get up, not allowing herself to die. This behavior began to frighten the spirit, since Tin was badly injured and no one knew what was really happening to him. Suddenly the singing of a bird was heard, which was approaching the scene of events every second. It turned out that it was a postal crane carrying some kind of message. Opening the letter, Jiuzi decided to study it to find out who was contacting her. The letter said that a long time had passed, and the sender heard that the dragon chef had returned to the restaurant, and he expressed his desire to visit him tomorrow to try the feast of the 8 divine dishes. With horror, Jiuzi realized that the letter was sent from the righteous Tai. It seemed too much, and as if a righteous man was mocking, and Ting's life and mind were now at risk, and preparing 8 divine dishes for tomorrow was ridiculous. The situation was hopeless, and even the goddess could not imagine what to do next. Sometime later, events unfolded in Tao's house. The worried girl didn't know what to do in this situation, especially with the dragon cook who was still unconscious. A very worried spirit turned to Jiuzi, saying that the cook still had not come to his senses, and perhaps he would handle it the same way as before. But the goddess realized that this guy knew nothing about the 8 divine dishes, their preparation, processing, knife technique, and this was something completely different, and he had not even trained. However, Tai's lease on the space hasn't expired yet, so when Ting wakes up, they can go there and train. In fact, even if the protagonist learns how to prepare these dishes, the ingredients for them are extremely rare and almost impossible to obtain in a single day. The alarmed girl asked the spirit to get ready and run, as she would be able to take him to Earth, where he could be satisfied with food and drink. The worried team continued to think about how to get out of this difficult situation. And so the guy gradually began to come to his senses, trying to open his eyes. As soon as he succeeded, sweat appeared on his face, as if he was in a very hot place. And this was really so, because tin was in a steam bath, like an ingredient for a dish. Even the dragon felt discomfort from the heat. The smart guy concluded that the steam is not evenly distributed in and around the ingredients, but with good control it can create rich texture and flavor. Once again, Tin expressed his desire to take this test again. The golden dragon was startled by such a request, since it had already been said that the guy had successfully passed this test 3 times and it was approved, and it was unclear why he could not be satisfied. But for Ting, this was a unique experience, and ordinary chefs can only judge a dish by its appearance and smell, but he can now remember every detail of the preparation, and he cannot miss this opportunity. The cunning dragon announced that he considered the guy already sufficiently trained, but he had a limited supply of energy, which is why he could no longer carry out such tests. This answer clearly did not suit the protagonist, and he exclaimed that he was the best knife of the 3 worlds, so he needed to continue working. Starting to cry, the dragon accepted the situation and continued to recreate the tests. First, the hot flame test began. Each test had to be repeated 100 times. The next test was hot oil, which was repeated 65 times. The next test was a stream of blades. 1,000 blades flew at the main character, recreating mincemeat chopping. The guy liked it very much, and he literally shouted to the golden dragon to continue creating challenges. Sometime later, the golden dragon became weak because he had reenacted the trials over 300 times already, and he begged for a chance to rest because he really couldn't take it anymore. Realizing the complexity of the situation, the dragon thought that if this were not a world of imagination, he would run away because this guy is crazy and he needs to deal with this as little as possible. At the same time, the guy began to think whether he should get out of this test. Hearing this, the dragon immediately exclaimed that if he was released, he would do whatever the hero wanted. Jumping onto the head of a giant dragon, the smart young man wanted to talk to him, and he asked the sharpest knife to tell him about the skills of all the dragon cooks. Looking at the guy, the dragon immediately realized that he wanted to find out about all the dragon's past cooks. Thus, the golden dragon began to talk, starting with the first cook, describing that the first dragon cook was very fond of smelling his hands. Meanwhile, events developed in the real world, where the main character was already tied to a chair with ropes. Jiuzi was responsible for the dragon cook and resolutely stayed in place, eager to protect him, and she didn't want to let him escape, and she was willing to take care of him. Suddenly a strong wind arose, which was unusual for this place. None of the deities could understand what was happening and why there was such a gust of wind. A giant magical portal was formed, from which someone was supposed to appear at any minute. With every second, the portal expanded, striking in its size and dimensions. Neither the spirit nor the girl could understand what was happening and who had arrived at Tao's store. The unknown person arrived in a luxury car, accompanied by several security guards. Immediately after this, the door began to open and a man climbed out of the driver's seat. Perplexed, Tin's comrades were shocked by what was happening. It turned out that this was the same mister who wanted to visit Tao's shop. His appearance was truly impressive and unique. The respected Mr. S clothes were really strange, and Jiuzi immediately noticed this, and the man objected, claiming that he had been wearing this shirt for hundreds of centuries, and there was nothing surprising since it was very comfortable. Approaching the Tao house, the man noticed that it had changed a lot, and that there used to be hundreds of floors here, but he had never seen anything like this. Looking at the Tide guy, the businessman was shocked by what he saw. It turned out that the man already knew who he was, as he had learned a little information about him during this time, and he was a dragon cook who had never cooked. The frightened comrades did not understand how Mr. could know this, as if he were in the human world. This was indeed the case, and Jiuzi herself showed him the way, and the old man really enjoyed her cooking skills. This behavior angered the girl. She realized that this scoundrel was watching her. He actually approached the Jade Emperor asking if he should worry about Jiuzi when the previous cook died and an unreliable dragon like her went in search of a new one, but who could have known that she would fall asleep for hundreds of years after a good feast. And Jiuzi knew very well that the realities of the divine and demonic world were different from the human one, and the only thing that remained unchanged was cooking, and sometimes it was worth thinking about how disgusting it was to eat the wind and tasteless elixirs while she was down there. The return of the dragon cook caused a sensation in the three worlds, and the Jade Emperor expressed his intention to send the girl to hard labor on the North Sea, but Mr. offered her one last chance to prepare the 8 divine dishes. Jiuzi immediately emphasized that there was no problem with the dishes, but the necessary ingredients were still lacking, and she argued that the Jade Emperor should understand this, and there were no suitable foods at the moment. It turned out that this moment was also foreseen by the visiting mister. Suddenly, he ordered his servants to open the trunk. The contents of the trunk impressed everyone, since no one expected such readiness. The caring man considered himself perfectly prepared because he had collected all the necessary ingredients in advance. If the dragon cook can prepare the 8 divine dishes, it will bring her glory and everyone will recognize her efforts. Otherwise, she will face exile to the North Sea. The angry girl exclaimed that this scoundrel had been using her services for a long time, and now he was doing this. 8 divine dishes is the most famous dish created more than 5,000 years ago by a dragon cook, and not a single recipe has been preserved in the 3 worlds, and this dish can only be prepared by resurrecting the cook who created it. Suddenly, the girl turned around and screamed that she might be sent to the North Sea, but first she was going to give him a good beating. Burning with anger, Jiuzi did not let up in her attacks, wasting her energy without regret. However, in the eyes of the stranger, her act seemed stupid, and he began to use his magical abilities. Summoning a magical seal, he created a protective barrier designed to repel the attack. The clueless girl was surrounded by many magical spheres. Suddenly, all the magic spheres turned into ropes, trapping Jiuzi and making it impossible for her to move. This order was sent by the Jade Emperor. She would go to any lengths to submit to his will, even if it meant death. A scream was heard from behind the villain, demanding to let the girl go. Such an unexpected turn surprised the influential magician, and he turned around. She saw that there was no one on the chair, and the ropes were torn. The worried girl realized that Tin had finally come to his senses after a long sleep. It was a joyful event, for a savior had come, ready to fight for his friends. The earth began to tremble, as if a strong earthquake had begun. The House of Tao was undergoing a transformation that began after the hero improved his skills. An ordinary retail store was transformed into something amazing that could amaze visitors. The results of his labors were impressive because everyone saw how the House of Tao was changing. Nobody believed their eyes because the size of the house was truly impressive. Once the transformation of the house was completed, a magnificent mansion appeared before them. Its beauty and scale were impressive, and the cost was really high. Its size was gigantic, more like a multi-story building than an ordinary house. Even the spirits began to cry with happiness because it became clear to them that Tin had really changed. In shock, Jiuzi realized that Ting was wielding a knife, and even under such circumstances, the changes in the house seemed excessive to her. With arrogance, the stranger asked the dragon cook if he knew why the venerable guest had come here. Although the young man had a split head, he, while unconscious, heard about the need to prepare 8 divine dishes, which, in his opinion, was an easy task. This answer did not suit the man, and he asked him to calm down, explaining that the guy was too young and should learn modesty, and choosing to become a dragon chef was a big mistake. During his travels in the human world, the scoundrel met a talented young man named Huang Tian, and this guy was so talented that he was destined to become a dragon chef. This information enraged Tin, and he felt he had to take revenge. It reminded him of the villain who caused him to lose in a fight with another chef. Because of this incident, Ting had to kneel down and apologize to the Huang family. Angry, Tin stated that the stranger simply had not tasted real food. The man was amazed by this answer and ordered the weakling to do what he wanted, but he was not allowed to be the dragon's cook. The hero didn't really care whether he was the dragon's cook or not, but today he was going to demonstrate his culinary skills. And everyone present here will see what a real delicacy is. The 8 divine dishes is a famous dish created by an ancient culinary master turned dragon chef. It includes 8 extremely rare ingredients, such as Heavenly Lake divine clam meat, golden wheat, 1,000-year palmyra leaves, paradise ginseng root, devil's tail, jade bamboo shoot, pure soul crayfish, and 9 royal phoenix wings. Some of these ingredients are found in places inaccessible even to immortals, making them very difficult to obtain or grow. It is said that when the dragon cook first prepared this dish, the whole of heaven was filled with its aroma, and everyone who tried it declared that it was the best thing he had ever eaten. After eating the 8 divine dishes, some gods gained additional strength, so this is truly a divine food. The hero was ready to cook this dish and make it better than ever before. The guy decided to ask the impudent man what would happen if he prepared 8 divine dishes. Laughing, the scoundrel said that, of course, he recognized his mastery in the art of dragon cooking. But the hero was not satisfied with this, and he wanted the villain to offer something else in return. Namely, if Ting prepares 8 divine dishes, then the man will recognize himself as a servant with crooked teeth, and Jiuzi's case will be closed. This condition was really harsh, and even the spirit and the girl were surprised. Such a request greatly angered the man, because the hero could not imagine who he had to deal with. Then Ting decided to tell his story, and before he was calmly at home, but the respected Jiuzi suddenly kidnapped him and brought him here. She also healed his wounds, and so he was going to reward her with a good job as the dragon's cook. However, an unexpected guest came and started making accusations around, which displeased Tin, and he was unclear as to why he needed to cook for him. The dissatisfied man shouted that the customer is always right, and as a dragon cook, Tin is obliged to serve him right now. The cook must cook with his soul, and the client must feel the dish with his heart, even if he forces the hero to cook, and what comes out cannot be called a real dish. In this case, the impudent one decided to play by the rules of the main character, and if he prepared 8 divine dishes, the impudent one would immediately apologize to him and admit that he was a servant with crooked teeth, provided, of course, that the guy could handle it. But if not, it will not only strip him of the title of Dragon Chef, but also give him back his old hands, and when the time comes, Huang Tian will become the new Dragon Chef, and what's more, Juzi will be subject to twice the punishment for choosing the wrong candidate. The spirit clearly did not like what he heard, and he shouted that they did not agree, and he did not have the decision on how Juzi would be punished. Suddenly the hero put his hand on the impudent man's hand. Thus, they made a bet and had to fulfill its terms in case of victory or defeat. Sometime later, events developed in the house of Taut. In one of the offices, it was discussed that this dragon cook looked somehow strange. After all, the 8 treasures were too valuable, and perhaps it was wasteful for the boss to offer all of them as ingredients. It turned out that the impudent man had not had the 8 treasures for several thousand years, because he had only tried them together with the Jade Emperor. It was almost a deception. It was difficult to gather the main ingredients for this dish, even more difficult to obtain the supporting ingredients, and the most difficult thing was to put everything together, and some of the ingredients are not so rare, such as the crayfish of shining ice. The advisor immediately suggested that perhaps this could make the task easier for the dragon cook. In fact, this does not contribute at all to solving such a complex problem. Meanwhile, events unfolded in the kitchen. The spirit inspected the kitchen area, and the video indicated that Tao's house had undergone significant changes thanks to the magic knife. For greater success, it was also necessary to prepare as many special dishes as possible and the sharpest knife. The #1 culinary tool in the 3 worlds recognized Ting as its master, and it was hard to believe. Juzi did not even want to discuss this, considering the spirit a scoundrel, since he bet on double the punishment. Suddenly, the sound of glass breaking was heard in the kitchen as the dragon cook accidentally dropped it. Now he was in serious danger, since there was a serious monster nearby, who grabbed him right by the nose and was not going to let the guy go. It turned out that it was a crayfish, which with its claw squeezed Tin's nose with full force. Laughing, the spirit exclaimed that using an ordinary kitchen knife, even the sharpest one, would be difficult in the fight against the immortal crayfish, and this crayfish lives in the Jade Pond and has amazing fighting power that even immortals could not overcome in the first place. If not for Teia's intervention with the talismans, Tin would have faced an even greater challenge. Experiencing severe pain, but overcoming it, the hero began to summon a sharp knife. As soon as the knife was in his hands, he struck the ruck with a flourish to put an end to this great rival. However, as it turned out, the strongest cancer died even before the blow was made, leaving this world as a glorious warrior. The hero really did not expect that the sharpest knife could be so aggressive, but the golden dragon explained to him that everything in this world, whether living or inanimate, are just ingredients intended for food. Immediately after this, the sharpest knife demanded from its owner the opportunity to work on the dish. The knife literally screamed that he was very hungry and asked the guy not to stop. Not understanding what was happening, Tin stood rooted to the spot while his friends urged him to start preparing the ingredients. Suddenly, the guy turned to Juzi and asked how valuable this cancer was in her opinion. In her opinion, the crayfish was truly valuable because it lived in the Jade Pond at a depth of 9,000 meters and was an unusually powerful and rare creature, but the purpose of the matter remained unclear. Having asked to look closely, Tin picked up the crayfish and showed it to his friends. What they saw really shocked them and caused them concern. In their opinion, there was nothing unusual in this, since it was a female carrying eggs. Annoyed, the guy laughed evilly and asked his friends if they knew anything about artificial breeding. Sometime later, events unfolded in the royal garden, where all kinds of birds and animals from the 3 worlds lived. All the animals in the garden were impressive and inhabited the entire area. Looking at the water, the protagonist's friends noticed a large amount of caviar. Soon they saw a huge number of small crayfish hatching from the eggs. Suddenly, someone around caught one of the crayfish that was swimming nearby. The main character was the one who cleverly caught one of the crayfish, and his joy was sincere. The joy was truly sincere, and the guy noted that catching these crayfish is really dangerous. Meanwhile, Juzi hugged the spirit, realizing that they could finally make money and Taoya's house would be saved. But then again, Ting had never prepared the 8 divine dishes, and it was unknown how well he would do this dish. Looking at the guy, Jiuzi was furious, not understanding why he was smiling, because if he did not prepare 8 dishes, it would be the end for everyone. Continuing to smile, Tin asked the worried girl to calm down. Taking his pendant in his hand, he asked the old man to come out of it. As soon as he said this, a magical portal instantly formed, from which someone should appear. The spectacle was truly impressive, and the friends could not believe their eyes. The one they saw was a golden dragon, capable of flight and of gigantic size. The frightened friends continued to look at this huge creature without moving from their place, because fear gripped them. Suddenly, the hero exclaimed that the dragon should make a more friendly face, because there was no one to scare. Frightened by the giant dragon, Jiuzi began to shout that Ting's ancestors were great people and he should not risk their history, otherwise he would have to face the ancestors. At that same second, a huge explosion began, and the friends thought that Tin had screwed up and was about to die. However, when they opened their eyes, they discovered something amazing that made them freeze. The golden dragon turned into a little dragon, which began to obey its master. The guy decided to ask his new assistant if he knew how to cook crayfish of the purest soul. The clever little dragon immediately understood that his master meant cancer from the 8 divine dishes. This crayfish is one of the 8 divine treasures living in the Jade Pond, and has an amazing taste, and its meat, saturated with the energy of water and ice, makes the dish not only an exquisite delicacy, but also has a beneficial effect on the powers of immortals. Particularly important are additional products such as bilchun leaves, rootless water pumped from a well, flowers of the goddess of illusions. These 33 spices are cooked within 72 hours. Unfortunately, this dish turned out to be much more complicated than the hero expected. The ingredients needed for this dish were not among those provided by Tei, which made the task much more difficult. The hero decides to turn to the spirit and asks if he can find the necessary ingredients in the Garden of 1,000 Herbs. This idea was ruled out as the current level of the Taodai house did not allow for the cultivation of such rare ingredients in the 1,000 Herb Garden. At this time, Jiuzi realized that the old scoundrel had deceived them again. Sometime later, events developed late in the evening. In Tao's house that could be heard throughout the house. It was Tai, knowing that Jiuzi had probably already realized that the necessary ingredients for the dish were missing, was happy about it, and wanted to see her reaction. Despite the fact that immortals are not experienced cooks, Tai deliberately checked with the dragon cook about the ingredients that were missing in Tao's house. Although they have already realized that they do not have enough time to search for spices, they are ready to kneel before Tai. One of the courtiers began to praise Tai, calling him the brightest and truly brilliant. The scoundrel suddenly declared that he preferred to be cunning rather than bright. At this time, the hero and his friends were sitting in the kitchen in confusion, not knowing what to do. The laughter coming from the room can be clearly heard through the ventilation. The upset girl had already begun to think about how to talk to this vile old man as soon as possible. The brave guy decides to ask the spirit to show all the ingredients available in Tao's house. Using its magical abilities, the spirit begins to show all the ingredients that are available. Although there were a lot of ingredients, there were still none needed. The guy continues to study the ingredients, thinking about how to get out of this difficult situation. His thoughts are full of contradictions, but he realizes that he cannot give up and must act. Even the spirit realizes that there is nothing available that can be used for this dish. Suddenly, Tin exclaims that this is wonderful. Looking around, the friends cannot understand what happened to him. Pointing to the necessary ingredients, the hero asks the spirit to prepare them. Now they need to start cooking the most complex dish imaginable. Not wanting to argue with the guy, the spirit prepares all the necessary ingredients. Immediately after this, the cooking process begins, and with dexterity, Tin expertly chops the required ingredients. Taking the sharpest knife in the 3 worlds, he continues cooking and does it skillfully, bringing himself pleasure. Using his magical abilities, he brings the job to the end, striving to make the dish the most delicious in the world. Friends cannot believe their eyes, because in a few days the insecure Tin has turned into a legendary chef. At sunset, the hero announced with delight that the problem had been solved and the dish was ready. A little later, events unfolded in Tao's house, where Tae was invited to a tasting of the dish. Looking at the plate, the servants were amazed, not believing their eyes, and how such a simple dish could be so tasty. Even Tae himself was amazed, not believing that this was a real divine dish in front of him. With a smile, the guy admitted that it might not be as divine as it seemed. Tae expressed his dissatisfaction, saying that he would not allow cheating. As a dragon chef, he has not fulfilled the immortal's order and failed the test, which may result in the wrath of the Jade Emperor. This turn of events caused great anxiety among the protagonist's friends, and they stood in anticipation of the next events. The smart guy decided to attract the scoundrel's attention by starting to talk about the cancer of the purest soul, the creation of heaven and earth, the most valuable ingredient with crystal white, smooth and tasty pulp. The use of crayfish of the purest soul in the dish was to preserve the taste of all ingredients as much as possible. Cooking crayfish with a variety of spices and simmering slowly can lead to excellent results, but it will lose its authentic flavor. This really intrigued Tae, and before leaving, he decided to listen to the end. Continuing his story, the hero noted that crayfish live in very cold waters, as a result of which their meat becomes so tough that it is difficult to chew. This is why slow simmering using a variety of spices is the best way to cook this meat and give it a more tender texture. Even the bodyguards, who were lovers of fine food, admitted that this guy truly had a wealth of knowledge. Tae exclaimed, believing that the guy must understand that this is the only way to preserve the taste in a dish for 1,000 years. But, according to the main character, the situation was somewhat different. The reaction was immediate, and everyone was shocked that the guy disagreed with Tae. Friends were also amazed at this turn of events and could not understand why he contradicted his own words. An angry Tae turned around to listen to the guy who intrigued him so much. The angry man called the young man an upstart, claiming that he considered himself capable of surpassing the greatest dragon cook. Closing his eyes, the guy explained that he, of course, did not claim that he could surpass the greatest chef. However, the development of culinary art requires innovation, and his first ever crawfish dish prepared by the dragon cook was a magnificent masterpiece, but not the only way to prepare it. His hometown has developed a unique cooking method to keep fish and crayfish fresh and tender for as long as possible, while also preserving the beneficial properties of these ingredients. In the main character's town, this method is called shredding. This term refers to thinly slicing meat on one side and using fresh meat on the other, which together creates tender and thinly sliced meat that is suitable for consumption. This method has been used to create gourmet dishes since ancient times, and is considered by many around the world to be the best way to prepare seafood. Therefore, his dish today is not just a crayfish stew, but a real masterpiece of pure taste. The guy extended his hand to the plate in which the new dish was presented. Lifting the lid, everyone was amazed at what they saw, because no one expected to see crayfish served in this way. Because it was cancer, shredded with soul. This exquisite dish amazed with its presentation and surprised with the chef's bold decision. The prepared dish resembled a beautiful landscape, causing an incredible impression. Looking at this dish brought tears to everyone's eyes because this magnificent dish was incredibly beautiful. The petals in the dish were made from crayfish meat, which becomes tough when cut into thick layers, but the thin slices remained soft and tender. Tin sliced the crayfish into 3,600 thin slices to ensure that each petal was tender, smooth, crunchy, and melt in your mouth. The crayfish meat had a cool aura that made it fresh for a long time. Even Tae admitted that this meat is indeed very tender, but it should not be eaten alone as its cold aura is too strong. This is why Ting decided to add fire flower petals from Tao's house to balance the temperature. The two leaves were cut into minute patterns to form a flower without separation. But that was not all. The stream next to the carved tree provided a special meat sauce that made the light meat richer in flavor. Before starting the dish, you had to dip the delicious meat in the sauce. Coming closer, Tin asked Taya if he would like to try this magnificent piece. The man could hardly restrain himself. His drool was literally flowing. Continuing to press Tay, the hero explained that this was not crayfish stew and asked if he agreed to evaluate this dish. Tay asked not to worry, promising that he would not do anything wrong if the dish lived up to expectations. Even Jiuzi assured that there was no reason to worry, since immortals are true to their taste preferences, especially in the presence of numerous witnesses. Wishing Taya a bon appetit, he began to try this legendary dish that had just been created. Taking the most delicate piece of cancer into his mouth with the help of chopsticks, the impudent man began to carefully study it. After he chewed the piece, an incredibly rich taste flashed in his mouth, striking in its delicacy. The servants were alarmed to see that something was wrong with their master and asked if he was all right. Tai continued to remain silent, and the guards were really worried, thinking that something had happened to the master. And suddenly, it was as if a fireworks of flavors exploded, striking absolutely everyone present in the room. The scoundrel who was threatening earlier couldn't help himself and started enjoying the gorgeous doggy style. The guards even yelled at him to slow down so he wouldn't choke. In light of the master's silence, the men decided to also try this dish and help him. Watching them eat, Tin realized that the old man simply did not know real cooking before. Within a few seconds, the plate became empty, and there was not a single delicious morsel left in it that Tei had so admired. Their appearance was far from noble. Their manners were absent. They overate so much that they were literally smeared with food. Suddenly, the girl decided to approach the gentleman to ask him a question. Jiuzi wanted to know if Tai thought Ting had the right to be a dragon chef. After thinking a little, the man exclaimed that he needed to think about this issue more. This angered the goddess so much because she knew how treacherous this old man was. After all, he actually wanted pure soul crayfish stew, but Ting prepared shredded crayfish of the purest soul, which did not meet his request. Even the spirit was irritated, not foreseeing that this freak was up to something again. But the dish was magnificent, the skill of the knife, the perfect shape, and yet there was too little food, and Tai was afraid that he had eaten it all too quickly and did not appreciate it. Winking at the man, the hero realized that it would not be possible to satiate the gentleman just like that. The guards also resented the small portions, claiming that the master would never admit that he was an impoverished slave. Unable to bear this behavior, Tai decided to act. Having grabbed two guards, Tai exclaimed that he would send these gluttons to catch crayfish and asked the dragon cook to prepare another delicious dish. Smiling, the young man decided to explain to the scoundrel that this was not a problem, and in Tao's house there were many crayfish of the purest soul. The skillful guy invited the spirit to lead the guests to their royal garden. Thanks to this, they were able to purchase large quantities of crayfish from the eggs found in these crayfish. The spectacle turned out to be truly impressive, since the men could not imagine that so many crayfish could be found in their river. The enterprising hero suggested that all these crayfish could be eaten, not limiting ourselves to stocks of shredded crayfish only in the Tao house, for a reasonable price, of course. One cancer of the purest soul cost 100 crystals. This was not difficult for the rich man, and he brought a chest with an abundance of crystals with which he was going to pay for the food. When the chest was opened, a bright light emanated from it because there were many crystals there. This sight turned out to be truly magical and delightful for the owners of the Tao house. Thanks to such clients, with such a supply of crystals, they can become truly rich. Sometime later, Tai stated that Mo Ting officially deserved to become a dragon chef. Jiuzi, who had wandered the human world for 100 years to find the dragon cook and return him to his place, intended to inform the Jade Emperor about this immediately. Taya's cook to prepare crayfish dumplings. Everyone was delighted that Ting was now officially recognized as a dragon chef. The spirit cried with happiness, rejoicing that his Taoed house was finally growing. The goddess was also very happy, seeing that the dragon's cook had finally found his place, and Taoya's house was finally blossoming. The main character himself experienced deep joy, realizing that now he really was the dragon's cook. Meanwhile, events were happening in the real world. Alone, the grandfather was thinking. More than 10 days had passed, and he wanted to know where his grandson was now. In the past, a portal appeared from which the hero screamed and called for his grandfather. The old man thought perhaps his old eyes were deceiving him, and he did not see his grandson. Suddenly, the portal began to appear again, and a beloved grandson was about to emerge from it. The silhouette of a man was getting closer every second. The elderly man watched the portal, amazed at this rare phenomenon. It was indeed Tin returning from the heavenly world to the human world. Mo Hong was very happy that his grandson finally came back and visited him. Shedding a stingy manly tear, the boy exclaimed that he missed his grandfather very much. Tin told his grandfather about what happened to him, and at the end he added that he had now become a real dragon cook. This confirmed the truth of the legend of the ancestors, and the origin of the knife acquired great significance. And this time the gods blessed the baby Tin, and his grandfather decided to arrange an incense ceremony. Smiling at this proposal, Ting asked his grandfather not to worry and suggested trying a delicacy from another world. He brought it with him to thank Mo Hong, and considering that this dish brings strength to the body, and grandfather was not in good health, he decided that a few pieces could help him. The knife work was excellent, and the presentation were also impressive, although the shape of the piece was not ideal, and in any case, Grandpa wanted to try this dish. Taking one piece of cancer, grandfather began to chew it slowly. Tin decided to ask his grandfather if he liked such an unusual dish. For an old man, it was truly impressive, and the rack was crunchy, sweet, cold, and refreshing, and the leaf perfectly neutralized the extra cold. Suddenly, Mo Hong felt something strange and felt very bad. He instantly threw down his chopsticks, feeling very bad. It was strange for the grandson, because his grandfather had never behaved like this before. Something strange began to happen to him. A transformation took place that clearly had a negative effect on him. Tin was anxiously afraid for his grandfather's life and tried to find out what was happening to him. Grandfather was not all right. His complexion changed dramatically. His gaze became empty. The man stood up from his chair and was breathing heavily, scaring his grandson. The sight was terrible, and Tin feared for his grandfather's life. Suddenly, Mo Hong's gaze suddenly shifted back. He hit the pots nearby with force, breaking them. It was a precious teapot made of Yasinski clay, which my grandfather kept for decades. At that same second, a rat burst into the room, frightened by the broken pots. Jumping onto the shelf, the rat began to hide behind pots of preserved food. This greatly upset the elderly man, and he expressed his displeasure to the rat, which hurriedly ran away. Alarmed, Tin tried to stop his grandfather, and next to him was a vessel inherited from their ancestors. However, Mo Hong seemed to not care and continued to destroy everything around him. With one powerful blow, all the pots on the shelf began to fall to the ground. The guy looked at what was happening, completely not understanding what was happening. Suddenly, the grandfather turned around and looked at his grandson. Then he looked up, looking at the spider hanging not far from the painting. It turned out that he was watching the spider and decided to attack it. Laughing, the distraught grandfather attacked the insect again. The grandson begged his grandfather to stop and at least not touch the portraits of his ancestors. Angry, the old man shouted to be let go. Clenching his fist, he used his powers to resist. The distraught Mo Hong attacked his grandson without even recognizing him. Feeling powerless, Tin prayed for his grandfather to come to his senses. Suddenly, a portal appeared nearby. Someone began to use magical powers on grandfather. It turned out that it was Juzi, who decided to help in a difficult situation. Turning to the guy, she decided to find out what happened. In the following moments, events unfolded in the Mo family home. The caring spirit began to help grandfather, and thanks to Juzi, he should have gotten better. Meanwhile, Juzi expressed her bewilderment towards the hero by loudly screaming for what he had just done. The goddess was furious that the dragon's cook had kidnapped a crayfish with the purest soul and served it to his grandfather. The guy who didn't understand anything couldn't understand why they were shouting at him, and all he wanted was to thank him. This answer only pushed the girl away, but she explained that people and immortals have different organisms, and she explained where it came from and why people can eat divine food. Feeling guilty, Ting was unwilling to admit what he had done, and he simply asked if Juzi really regretted eating for his grandfather. In fact, this is not what the goddess meant, and the spirit explained that the heavenly ingredients absorb divine energy that is absent in the earthly world, and if a mortal is unable to digest the divine dish, serious problems can arise. In turn, the guy is the dragon's cook, and therefore becomes half a divine being, and this does not concern him. Unlike the old man, who even at his age feels that one piece of this dish is equal to 100 ginseng roots. Feeling guilty, the guy nevertheless exclaimed that he understood and admitted his guilt. It doesn't matter that the goddess managed to help, otherwise the situation could have been even worse. Bowing down, the hero began to apologize, admitting his guilt, and also thanked his friends for helping his grandfather. Suddenly, Ting decided to look at his grandfather to see how he was feeling. But it turned out that he was not in the room, and the window was open. Inspired, Grandpa began chasing cats, full of energy. The excited guy shouted to his grandfather to come down, but it turned out that Juzi forgot to cast a spell while talking to the guy. The next morning, events unfolded again at the Mo family's house. Everyone was glad that grandfather had finally come to his senses. The elderly man got out of bed, assessing his condition. Getting up was easy, and he felt incredibly light. Grandfather literally felt that he was now a strong man. The joyful grandson also noticed that his grandfather seemed to look younger. Suddenly, the grandfather hit his grandson on the head with a stick. His grandson has no right to talk like that, and if it weren't for that girl, Ting would have killed him, and now he has destroyed the precious real clay teapot and family vessel. Sometime later, new events took place in the Mo family's house. The old man sank into depression, unable to find words to describe the pain and humiliation when he realized that he had destroyed family heirlooms. Suddenly someone exclaimed that the old man should not harm himself. Juzi made him happy, claiming that all these items could be easily restored. Using her magical abilities, the girl began to work miracles. And in the blink of an eye, she repaired all the relics that had been broken earlier. Each of the previously destroyed containers was restored instantly. The Mo family turned out to be really happy, and Grandpa couldn't believe his eyes. Despite Mo Ting's stupidity, his grandfather persevered and became stronger than before. Radiating happiness, Mo Hong thanked the immortals for correcting his grandson's mistake and saving his life, and now the Mo family is obliged to thank them for their kindness. It turned out that they came here with 3 goals: to save Mo, teach Grandfather Ting skills, and study earthly cuisine to diversify their menu. Understanding the importance of this mission, Mo Hong assured that he would not allow the immortals to be upset, since people should not destroy their reputation before the gods. Meanwhile, the guy told his grandfather that the gods, it turns out, don't know how to cook at all. In the 3 worlds, the gods either eat raw food by catching it, or they cry and use old bread as a sacrifice. The hungriest are even afraid of the wind, because they cannot cook anything for themselves. His clumsy dissection of the crayfish made even Taya's mouth water. The alarmed grandfather was wary of such a statement and sought to find out how true it was. The goddess confirmed that this is indeed the case, and the world of immortals is impressive, but their culinary skills leave much to be desired, and so they choose an ordinary person to be the dragon's cook. The title currently belongs to Imo Ting, the grandson of Imo Hong. Rushing out his sharpest knife, the grandson was eager to demonstrate his skill with the tool. Having tossed an orange, the young man began to act, bringing culinary art to life. By making many cuts on the orange, Tin was going to create a real culinary masterpiece. When the orange fell, its peel disintegrated instantly, like a magic flower. All this moment, grandfather had been closely watching what was happening and saw that his grandson was very good with his hands, and now the Imo family truly had an heir. The elderly man also decided to please the immortals by declaring that he would personally prepare the Imo family's dishes for them. Grandfather and the immortals immediately left, and the grandson was alarmed, because he was not invited. Turning around, Imo Hong announced that Ting was now the dragon's cook and he had to cut the apple into 4 parts, each of which should be divided into another 3,000 slices, and one portion should be cut into cubes the size of a grain of rice. The other should be chopped so that each piece passed through the eye of a needle, and cut the third portion into strips. The slices must be the same thickness, and if there is even the slightest flaw, he must start all over again. And now that his hands have healed, he will have to perform these tasks himself. Smiling, the grandson realized his fate and the task that his grandfather had entrusted to him. Shaking his head slightly, he bowed farewell to his grandfather, since it was now his responsibility to carry out this work. Sometime later, events unfolded in a restaurant where Imo Hong was preparing signature dishes. The immortals immediately devoured each dish, realizing how delicious it was prepared. Grandfather's dishes were delicious, and the spirits acknowledged this with gratitude. Imo Hong also felt great, because he enjoyed the very piece of cancer that Imo Ting kindly shared with him. The spirits recognized that grandfather's food was indeed delicious, but it lacked the divine aura that the food of immortals possessed. That is why they brought the purest crayfish, and Imo Hong was tasked with preparing it. The goddess immediately reacted to stealing food and believed that he should receive the punishment he deserved. A little embarrassed, but admitting his guilt, the spirit asked if Jiuzi would like to try the cancer of the purest soul. Having released the spirit, the girl admitted that she would be glad to try, but only in small quantities. The elderly man beamed with happiness and exclaimed that if his guests wanted, he could easily prepare this dish. However, as soon as Imo Hong started cooking, his knife immediately broke because this crayfish was really hard. Suddenly, loud laughter was heard in the immediate vicinity as someone noticed this absurd situation. It was Tin who laughed at his grandfather, explaining that this was divine food and should only be cut with the sharpest knife. As a result, you have to use the sharpest knife in the world to deal with such hard food. Outraged, the elderly man decided to ask his grandson what he was doing here, since he was told to train with a knife. Smiling, the guy explained that grandfather should not worry, because he had successfully completed this task. The elderly man immediately did not believe what he heard, believing that it was impossible so quickly, and before he had been condescending to his grandson. But if he was lying, then the grandfather would be decidedly angry. A little embarrassed, the guy explained that he really wasn't lying, and if Grandpa doubted it, he could check it himself. Imo Hong still continued to not believe it, and decided to check it out personally. On the table were several plates with sliced apples that met the requirements of the task. To make sure that the task was completed correctly, the grandfather decided to conduct a test. Grabbing many pieces of apple, he began tossing them into the water to test how thin they were. What the immortals saw really amazed them, because no one had been able to repeat something like this before. The slices were so thin that even in water they seemed transparent, like small jellyfish. The next test was the incredibly thin apple thread, and it successfully passed through the eye of the needle, confirming the completion of the next task. The shocked grandfather admitted that his grandson's knife skills were truly perfect. The grandfather even cried with happiness and wanted to ask his grandson how he did it. This was possible thanks to hard training, because it was known that no one else was capable of this. Bowing his head, Imo Hong asked his grandson to cut the crayfish into threads. This was not difficult for the guy, and he wanted his grandfather to continue his education. In fact, the meat itself has a unique taste and can be cooked well even without the use of spices. For example, this soup is made with simmered broth and is delicious. However, the pieces of meat should not be too thin, otherwise they will not be suitable for this dish. What happened next was truly impressive, and without taking his eyes off, the hero, along with his comrades, watched as his grandfather cooked. With a little salt added, the soup and meat acquired a unique taste and melted in the mouth, and now it can be called cancer soup of the purest soul. The embarrassed guy immediately took the bowl of soup in his hands to take a closer look. With the slightest movement, pieces of meat swirl like a cloud, and this simple yet sophisticated approach to the basics of cooking is unique, and Grandpa was not going to back down. The gods and demigods decided to try the soup to evaluate its real taste. After they tried the whole soup, they wanted to eat the whole bowl at once, because this dish was extremely tasty. At this behavior on the part of the gods, Grandfather only laughed, glad that they liked this dish so much. There are many ways to cook meat in China, including deep frying, pan frying, steaming, stewing, boiling, freezing, baking, and that's not all. Turning to his grandson, the grandfather exclaimed that he would teach little Tina everything he knew. The main character was sincerely grateful to his grandfather for such instructions and help in learning. Sometime later, events developed late in the evening. Talking to his grandson, the grandfather said that he could not even dream that he would be able to cook. Instructing his grandson, Imo Hong asked him to do the right thing and take advantage of all opportunities, because then he would become an excellent cook. The joyful guy asked his grandfather not to worry, because he would visit him and he should not worry. On the other hand, he was also going to visit the Huang family to return to them the humiliation they had suffered. Having laughed, the grandfather did not expect that his grandson was still offended by this family. Turning around, Imo Hong decided to ask little Ting if he remembered how their Imo family cooked. After thinking a little, the guy suggested that the Imo family cooked perfectly, unforgettably for their guests. They are masters who put their soul into every dish, and the main thing for them is honesty and virtue, and lies and deceit will never bring true glory. Their family is welcoming to every guest, and with the highest skill is ready to satisfy their hunger. In ancient times, when people struggled to survive, especially when food was scarce, they found ways to make inedible things edible, and by translating something terrible to taste into something beautiful, the pinnacle of culinary art was achieved. From then to the present day, thanks to the efforts of culinary specialists, the number of ingredients available to people has grown from several tens to hundreds of thousands. With the increase in available ingredients, many cooking methods have been discovered. Cooking is something that brings joy and satisfaction to people's lives. Then the grandfather decided to convey the main idea to his grandson. Tin wants to become famous as a chef by using his cooking skills for revenge, and this may influence his current attitude towards cooking. Leaving the house, Imo Hong asked his grandson to think about it, arguing that the desire for revenge should not interfere with the true enjoyment of cooking. A little embarrassed, the guy began to think about what his grandfather meant. Suddenly, the door opened, and Jiuzi came in with spirit, looking for Imo Ting. It turned out that they had not been here for a long time, and the girl heard that delicious food was prepared here, so she asked to see all the food available. It was strange for the hero, because grandfather had prepared a whole feast for them, but they were still hungry, as if many kilograms of food could fit into them. In fact, immortals can eat 100 times more than ordinary humans and demigods. Sometime later, events moved to one of the cafes in China, where dishes cooked with natural butter were discussed. Many skewers with shish kebab were prepared for them. The bowls also contained fresh soup that you could try. The abundance of food was impressive in its scale, as if a feast had been arranged for only a few people. But the main character had to pay for all this, and the payment amounted to 4,444 yen. Even this large amount of food was not enough for the gods, and they wanted even more. The hero literally begged them to stop eating, because they could burst from excess food, and a crowd of people gathered nearby, wondering how an ordinary girl eats kilograms of food. After some time, they finally left the cafe, but the girl walked slowly to continue enjoying the taste of the food. Suddenly, someone exclaimed that they needed to get in line to board. The queue at the huge restaurant was huge as they were offering a 50% discount on all dishes, and many wanted to take advantage of this offer. Joyful Jiazi asked the boy to visit a restaurant where they probably had delicious food, but the hero was against it and preferred to return home. This answer angered the goddess because she healed his hands, but he did not express gratitude. Suddenly, someone nearby noticed the heir of the Mo family being beaten by a girl. Today, the Huang family restaurant opens with a banquet for all guests, and it is a great honor for the Mo family. The embarrassed hero found his enemy from the Huang family standing nearby. The guy looked at his enemy from the Huang family with an ominous gaze. The scoundrel felt confident and calmly looked at Tin as if they were friends. Tin recalled past events and harbored deep resentment towards the scoundrel. Huang Tianyu ignored the hero's dissatisfaction and asked if he was afraid to visit his restaurant. The guy turned away, explaining that this was not about courage, but that he didn't want anything to do with the Huang family. The impudent man turned to the guy again and asked how the Mo family remained the leading culinary dynasty in Ijo for hundreds of years when there were such cowards there. Unable to bear the insult, Ting asked for a repeat and said that he would appreciate the level of his family's dishes. The impudent man was waiting for this, deliberately provoking the main character. There were impressive statues outside the restaurant that invited all visitors to the Huang family's restaurant. The founder of the restaurant chain, Mr. Huang, came from Ijo, and their restaurants were distributed throughout the world. This restaurant was the first to open in the family's homeland. For over 100 years, the Huang family has perfected Sichuan cuisine by introducing new dishes and cooking styles. The Huang family introduced new dishes combining Sichuanese traditions and Western influences, which was well received by guests. Restaurant Huang is the only Chinese restaurant with 3 Michelin stars, aiming to bring a new taste to the city. The dishes in the restaurant were striking in their appearance, creating the impression of a work of art. Each dish looked like a real masterpiece. Huang Tian knew that neither the hero nor the girl next to them had ever tasted such food. The scoundrel added that the Mo family had a limited understanding of the world, while the Huang family had created many unique recipes by traveling around the world. The insolent behavior was unacceptable for the main character, who considered him too talkative. Jiazi was hungry, but Ting didn't know whose side she was on, because he was their enemy and he couldn't eat their food. The enmity did not bother the girl, and she considered the main character spineless, who did not dare to try the dishes. Finally, it was announced that all guests could taste the delicious dishes. The joyful guests began to taste the food, leaving room for other dishes. All the food on the tables and in the forks suddenly disappeared. Food disappeared from all the tables, as if an invisible hand had collected it in the blink of an eye. Despite the fact that no one could understand what happened, Juzi quickly ruined everything in a matter of seconds, after which she asked for more. People were furious with the girl, not knowing where she came from, and she scared everyone to death, and no one could understand what had happened here. Even Huang Tian didn't understand why he brought them here, and if he had known what would happen, the opening ceremony would not have been disrupted. Without hesitation, the hero decided to act and grabbed the girl to protect her. Fearing the possible consequences, Tin ordered the girl to run away to avoid a fight. However, as soon as he ran, he immediately collided with someone. The strong blow caused dizziness, and Tin sat on the floor for several minutes. It turned out that it was the head of the Huang family, and he realized that Ting had come to ruin the opening ceremony and now wanted to sneak away. The angry guy immediately identified the culprit standing in front of him. Starting to make excuses, the hero shouted that it was not his fault, that it was his son who invited them here, and they arranged a banquet for everyone. Today they really opened a restaurant and invited everyone, but the question is whether they are really guests. Looking straight into the eyes of the impudent man, Tin did not understand what he meant. The man turned to those around him, believing that everyone was interested in who this young man was. He then explained that the boy was the heir of the Mo family, and some time ago, the Huang and Mo families competed for a restaurant, and the Mo heir refused the culinary duel, and the Huang family won fair and square. Today was supposed to be the opening ceremony of Huang restaurant, and the restaurant held a banquet to thank the guests, but did not expect that the Mo family would send two evil guests to ruin everything. Those around them also believed that the Mo family behaved wickedly after their loss. Others began to say that the girl looked like she hadn't eaten in years. This kind of behavior was unacceptable, and some felt it was shameful to associate with such people, and perhaps even Miss had been a pig in the past. Unable to bear the insults, the guy began to get up from the floor. He looked at the culprit and made it clear that what happened had nothing to do with the Mo family. His girlfriend did not want to cause harm, because it was his request, and this act was not a crime for which one could be punished. The man objected, claiming that both the Mo and Huang families had excellent cooks, and he didn't want to call the police or worry himself about it. In that case, they could forget about the incident since he already had a proposed solution that he may have already encountered. The solution was that the main character had to kneel and apologize. The guy was amazed that the scoundrel proposed such humiliation as a solution to the conflict. Suddenly, someone from behind spoke to Tin, stopping him. This was a girl who decided to step in and do something about it. Juzi continued to move forward resolutely, and it was unclear what exactly she intended to do in this situation. One of her eyes began to glow bright blue, as if she was about to use her magical powers. Then she turned to the impudent man, asking if he really believed that he had the right to order the dragon cook from their heavenly world to kneel. Mr. Huang was not aware of the existence of the dragon chef and was eager to find out from the girl whether this scoundrel had betrayed him, considering that he should probably bow to her. Thinking that the spirit could incarnate in the form of a dog, the man opined about a rare breed of dog, suggesting that it could be its protective spirit. Faced with a difficult situation, Spirit and Juzi resolutely sought to destroy everything around them. Unable to bear it, Pro exclaimed, claiming that the old man was looking for his death. Everyone was amazed that the dog was talking, and no one could understand the true nature of this creature. The worried hero tried to calm them down, persuading them to stop their actions. But they could not be stopped, and the spirit and the girl used their magical abilities to suppress their opponents. The wrath of the gods fell on ordinary people, punishing them for their insolence. A pillar of bright light could be seen in the city, which arose as a result of magical influence. After the explosion at the moment of using magic, the building was completely destroyed. Several concrete slabs fell on the main character, but he miraculously survived. Looking around, he found no signs of life around him. Apparently, only darkness remained from the explosion. Suddenly someone exclaimed, saying that it seemed that the old man needed a protective amulet. Some were already thinking of cooking something tasty out of the old man, since he was clearly not full. It turned out that it was a giant monster, the embodiment of an explosion. The huge creature approached the impudent man and began to sniff him. At the same moment, Juzi exclaimed that they were too proud and insignificant, not realizing the true power of the dragon chef, and she was obliged to punish them for this. Using her divine power, the girl decided that the scoundrels should be punished for insulting the dragon cook. Wishing death to the impudent people, the goddess summoned lightning, sparkling in the air, about to destroy the pitiful people. The alarmed and frightened people begged for mercy, hoping that the goddess would not touch them in this way. Even Mr. Huang, overcome with tears, begged to be allowed to live. Suddenly, the hero decided to stop what was happening and grab the girl. Exclaiming that it was his problem, he promised to deal with it himself. The goddess protested, not wanting to tolerate such an attitude towards herself. Having dealt a strong blow to the demigod, the girl sought to continue punishing the poor people. Realizing the complexity of the situation, the hero ran up again and asked Jizi to stop, explaining that they were ordinary people and did not deserve to die. The mad goddess ordered him to shut up and not even try to stop her. With the last of his strength, the guy shouted, inviting them to go home and enjoy a delicious dinner. Hearing this, the girl's mood instantly changed. Her eyes returned to the normal color she had in her normal appearance. The benevolent Jizi agreed to leave on the understanding that she would eat at home as much as she wanted. Sighing with relief, the guy exclaimed that they had come to an agreement and it was time for them to go home. The goddess decided to spare these people, and all this became possible thanks to the dragon cook. As she began to teleport, Jizi asked Tina to hurry back as his magnificent dishes were already waiting for him. People began to think that the girl was an evil demon, some kind of magical creature, and it seemed that Tin was connected to her. The sad restaurant owner Juan continued to look at the hero, not knowing what to say. The smart guy continued to fix his gaze on the scoundrel and told him that today's commotion was over. As a bonus, Tin decided to show off his fighting skills. Taking a cucumber from his pocket, he was going to demonstrate his culinary skills in practice. Using his sharpest knife in the world, he planned to do the impossible, something no one else could replicate. He repeatedly cut the vegetable as it floated in the air. And as soon as it landed on the plate, a miracle happened. As he said goodbye, Ting said that they would see the Huang family again. When Huang Tian touched the cucumber, he expected to see what would happen to it. The incredible happened, and the cucumber, which seemed whole, turned into tiny threads floating in the air. In the blink of an eye, he created these threads that floated on the wind. This was the style of the Mo family, and none of his contemporaries could repeat this because it was excellent craftsmanship. Sometime after the return, events continued, and no one knew how much food would still fit into the goddess and her spirit. Meanwhile, events unfolded at the Mo family's home. The grandfather reprimanded the hero for not taking revenge professionally. Now he shouldn't consider himself a dragon chef after the incident at that restaurant. Grandfather tried to defend Ting, claiming that he was not to blame, and the Huang family had no right to blame the spirit for eating all the food. This was the truth, and if it weren't for Mo Ting, the Huang family would have been much worse off. Laughing, the old man turned to the immortals, believing that the blame for all the incidents lay with Tina. Mo Hong understood his dissatisfaction and resentment towards the Huang family, but such an attitude would not help him become a real specialist. The grandson did not understand why he would not be able to achieve this, and sought to find out what the reason was. Then his grandfather asked him if he knew the origin of Sichuan cuisine. Previously, such a concept did not exist, but with the emergence of Sichuan chefs, the features of various cuisines came together to create a unique taste. These were people who learned from different masters, humbly drew on experience, and did not argue. Without their work, Sichuan cuisine would not exist. Exploring how cancer would have ended up in Sichuan dishes if the chefs hadn't learned from the masters of Shanghainese and Cantonese cuisine. Despite serious problems with his hands, Tin read family books and taught himself to cook every day. However, the pride and history of the Mo family could not be forgotten, and abandoning the experience of the ancestors was unacceptable. In that case, a guy doesn't deserve to be a Sichuan chef unless he's willing to sacrifice everything for it. As for the Huang family, they were driven by resentment and desire for revenge. They did not even try to evaluate them on a culinary level. Turning around, the old man also exclaimed that he was disappointed with his grandson. This turn of events truly upset the hero's comrades. The guy himself realized that his grandfather was right, and in those days when he didn't know how to cook, dreams of cooking were all he had. But after restoring his hands, he stopped treating cooking as something sacred. It became a common skill. The upset guy began to think about how he could get out of this difficult situation and overcome difficulties. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and an unexpected guest appeared in their house. Tin walked to the door to see who was behind it. The uninvited guest addressed the hero by name and asked him to open the door. It turned out that it was Huang Tian who came to talk. Grandfather and the goddess were greatly surprised by this, and they treated the unexpected visitor with caution. The spirit immediately recognized the Huang family member and predicted that his visit would be the end for him. Recalling the past events, Huang Tian was truly scared, remembering the spirit that had turned into a giant monster. Feeling very awkward, the guy admitted that his visit was not aimed at hostile actions, but that he was simply looking for Tin. Greeting the guest incredulously, the guy asked him for what purpose he was looking for him. Feeling great discomfort and gripped by fear, one tried to explain the purpose of his coming, but could not immediately find the words. Suddenly falling to his knees, he begged to be taught the skill of using a knife, ready to pay any price for this skill. Remembering his grandfather's words, Ting realized that he didn't deserve to become a Sichuan chef unless he was willing to give up everything to pursue his passion. The spirit continued to express dissatisfaction, claiming that he had been insulted and was now asking for help. Turning around, the hero seemed to want to seek advice from his loved ones, since he did not know what to do. But neither grandfather nor Jiuzi said a word, refusing to answer his unspoken question. Tin decided to admit that he had recently mastered the art of using a knife. Apologizing, Juan asked not to say anything more, since he already understood everything, and apologized to everyone. The upset guy began to leave and did not say another word, feeling guilty before such a master. Sighing heavily, the grandfather looked at his grandson, realizing that perhaps he really was not ready to become a chef of Sichuan cuisine. Suddenly the hero exclaimed, claiming that this skill belonged not only to him, but to every chef. Therefore, he offered his help to Huang Tian, saying that if he really strives for this, then he is ready to train him. Relatives immediately reacted to this, expressing joy over Tin's decision. Even Huang Tian himself was deeply surprised, not expecting that the great master would agree to train him. Suddenly, Jiuzi's locket hanging around her neck began to flicker. It turned out that it was a contract that came to her magically. It said that the Jade Garden would soon produce Manhwa, and the dragon cook should use it in a dish for the goddess Suwanmu. The concerned goddess immediately announced that the dragon's cook was expecting an important client, and it was necessary to immediately move to Tao's house. Having created a magical portal, Jiuzi prepared to transfer the dragon cook and the spirit to prepare for the upcoming celebration. Without hesitation, the guy also began to pack his things, preparing to move to the heavenly kingdom. Unfortunately, there was no time to explain why there was such a rush, and the girl began to drag the guy, trying to move as quickly as possible. The former enemy watched all this and was amazed that such a thing was even possible. With one last look at Huang Tian, Ting promised to train him after he figured out what was happening, and he wouldn't forget his family. Don't think about it. After this, the portal instantly closed, and the hero and his comrades disappeared. The sight was truly shocking, and the guy could not understand what had happened. However, he was confident that he would wait for Ting, and no matter the cost of training, he would still master this technique. Sometime later, events happened in the heavenly kingdom, because every 100 years, Manhwa blooms in the jade pond, and the previous dragon cook prepared an exquisite treat of 100 flowers, and Suwanmu was delighted. Suwanmu liked it so much that she gave him the precious peach of immortality, the most valuable gift in the world. This time, if he puts in the effort and Suwanmu is satisfied, Perhaps he will also receive some kind of gift. The guy immediately suggested that the peach of immortality could make the one who eats it immortal. But in reality, this is not the case, and with its help you can prolong your life, avoid diseases, and improve your overall health. And most importantly for Juicy, this peach is simply incredibly tasty. The hero was not particularly happy about this, but he still strived to create the perfect dish for Savanmu. Suddenly Poe entered the room, clearly happy about something. He literally jumped all over the room, knocking down everything in his path. To calm the spirit, the girl hit him hard in the face. Juicy was furious, not understanding what was happening to the spirit, as if it had gone crazy. It turned out that the spirit wanted to tell that feminine chicken and shredded crayfish of the purest soul are in great demand. Moreover, they now have over 10,000 crystals, which is a real fortune. These words really inspired the girl, and she was incredibly happy. After a long period of financial difficulties, they finally received money and decided to no longer complain about poverty, and now they had the opportunity to buy everything they dreamed of. Suddenly, the guy remembered that these crystals should be used to upgrade Tao's house. The goddess looked displeased at the proposal to give away the crystals they had earned, but the main character insisted that this was an integral part of a responsible approach, and after the update their earnings would increase significantly. Having learned about the opportunity to increase her income, Juicy again flared up with interest and was ready to listen carefully to the guy. The nervous hero nevertheless decided to ask the spirit what exactly they could spin the crystals on to improve Tao's house. They currently have 15,798 crystals in their account, which can be used to upgrade the ballroom to a luxury level, as well as upgrade 2 separate rooms. There are also plans to add 10 sets of dragonwood tables and chairs to give the interior a fresh look and fill the space with a fairy tale forest atmosphere. There is also a garden upgrade with 1,000 herbs that will be useful for future culinary experiments. This proposal aroused Ting's particular interest, and he expressed his desire to improve the 1,000-herb garden. The worried goddess did not understand why the garden needed to be improved and how it related to their future plans. Turning around, the guy exclaimed that they should go, because if everything goes well, they will earn a fortune. Sometime later, magical events continued in the garden. Friends wandered through the magical forest, exploring it in search of ingredients for new dishes. The forest itself was home to many different creatures, impressive in appearance, and some of them even seemed dangerous. Looking at all this nature, the hero could not believe that enough ingredients could be found here to feed the entire heavenly world. The spirit countered, realizing the potential of the House of Tao, which a person cannot even imagine, and this artifact is truly the most powerful of the 3 worlds. Suddenly, a bright light began to sparkle from the hero's backpack. It turned out to be a dragon, who began to question the spirit about what he said, and continued to make excuses, claiming that the golden dragon was also great for cooking. With this statement, they really looked powerful. After all, the House of Tao had existed for 3,000 years, and although it was difficult to imagine, still an entire house could not compare with the golden dragon. Even the hero was skeptical, because the golden dragon can only cut, while Tao's house has absolutely everything. This statement greatly angered the dragon, as he has no idea how the artifact's power relates to the abilities of its owners, and he does not realize how Tao's house greatly improves his cooking skills, and besides, the highest level of cooking is considered a heavenly feast. Suddenly, the spirit decided to interrupt the golden dragon's statements and closed his mouth. Not understanding the meaning of the dragon's words, the hero decided to clarify what the heavenly feast was. However, his comrades remained silent and did not want to reveal the secret of the heavenly feast. To calm the alarmed girl, the hero was sure that the ingredients from here could be used in any world, heavenly, demonic, and even among people. The goddess, looking down, decided to demonstrate one of the ingredients growing in the ground. Having snatched one of the ingredients, the hero was amazed at what happened next. Namely, as soon as the ingredient was torn out, it was instantly restored in the same place where it had previously grown. In just a few seconds, the plant that had just been pulled out was restored. For the hero, it was real magic, and he could not believe that this was possible. By breaking off a small piece of the plant, he wanted to make sure that it was really the same ingredient. It turned out to be real ginseng, and if they sold it, they would become the wealthiest in the world. In reality, this plant was not that rare, and anyone could buy it just like that, and their world was full of more valuable artifacts, and if ginseng or something like that were more expensive, Juzi would have become rich long ago. The gods do not care about the preciousness of the ingredients, and for them the main thing is taste, and the immortals really were superficial. Digging a small hole, the guy decided to do something that no one had ever done before. This immediately attracted the attention of his comrades, and they were interested in what Tin was up to. Turning around, the guy smiled and said that he was sowing seeds here. The alarmed girl wanted to know what kind of seeds they were and what he was up to again. Opening his backpack, the main character showed many different seeds that he took with him. These were the seeds of spices and vegetables that he asked his grandfather to collect from Earth, and despite the many different plants in this garden, there were still no earthly ingredients, and without them it was impossible to prepare a delicious dish. But for some reason, the seeds planted by him do not germinate so quickly. He had the same idea as the dragon's previous cooks, and in fact, many of the ingredients in his garden come from Earth. Some cultures have undergone many changes to adapt to the world around them. For example, wheat grew nearby, and it also underwent changes to adapt to the conditions of this world. What the hero saw really amazed him, and he could not even imagine that wheat could look like this. The wheat was incredibly large and completely different from what is grown on Earth. The tomatoes also looked huge, as if magnified thousands of times. The broccoli was impressive in size and resembled trees that had been growing for 1,000 years. The chili pepper was even larger and literally reaching for the heavens. Starting to laugh uncontrollably, Ting realized that he was right, and with this, he will be able to cook real Chinese food in his tiled house. His spirit immediately calmed down, explaining that it was not so easy to make earthly plants flourish in the heavenly world. The atmosphere of the immortal world is very different from the Earth, and cultivation here is extremely difficult, and in the past 10 million years, only a few dragon chefs have succeeded, and if he succeeded with crayfish, it does not mean that he will have luck here. Hearing this, the guy could not even imagine how difficult it is to grow something in this heavenly world. As if nothing had happened, the friends began to leave, and at the last moment they told the hero that he had better start studying heavenly ingredients, because it would definitely not be possible to grow earthly ones here. Tin was really upset by this fact, because he could not understand how he could cook dishes without the usual ingredients and how he could grow something on this heavenly soil, and whether it would even be possible. However, some chefs had pulled it off in the past, and the guy didn't want to give up. While observing the earth, he wondered what he should do to grow an earthly plant. His head was full of various thoughts, but he understood that he was a cook and could not understand why it was important for him to know how to grow vegetables. Suddenly, the dragon took several fragrant flowers from the guy's bag. The golden dragon, starting to laugh, suggested that it seemed that his old man was not very attentive, and these were not seeds at all. It turned out that it was manhwa, and grandfather grew it in his garden, and a whole tree grew from it. Suddenly, the guy came up with an idea, remembering past events. Grabbing the dragon, Tin began to act as he realized something. Having made up his mind, the guy ordered the dragon to turn into a knife. With a sly expression on his face, he announced that he had a plan. Sometime later, events developed in the tiled house. A huge number of dishes on the dinner table were eaten. Juzi ate too much and, wondering where Ting was, decided to test his persistence. In an instant, Juzi's belly disappeared, and she thought that let the dragon cook handle it, and then she decided to find out when the jade pond blooms. The flowering of the jade pond was expected in 3 or 4 days, but it was unknown whether Ting was ready. Suddenly someone burst into the room, knocking down the door. It was the main character, whose face showed joy. The exhausted guy shouted that he had succeeded, and it worked. The friends were at a loss, not understanding what was the matter, because their friend seemed almost crazy. The dragon did not like this, and he called the spirit crazy, and his entire family crazy. The golden dragon exclaimed that this child was a genius and couldn't believe it, but the guy really did it. Joy knew no bounds, and Tin was happy that his plan had come true. But after a few seconds, he fell from fatigue and exhaustion because he spent a lot of time in the royal garden. A few hours later, the comrades came to look at the works of the main character and were amazed. Because in a matter of days, he was able to grow a beautiful tree that had not been in the royal garden before. The smart guy wanted his friends to appreciate his work. The plant was truly impressive, and the friends continued to watch it in amazement. The comrades were amazed by this plant, as they had never seen anything like it before. These were snow orchids that emitted a wonderful scent and could be used either fresh or frozen. But the spirit also noticed something interesting. There were yellow flowers growing there, but it was not clear what kind of plant it was, since none of them had ever heard of a tree with two different flowers growing on it. The aroma emanating from them was incredible and literally caressed the nose from the inside. The goddess decided to ask the dragon cook if this was really his merit, and without denying it, the guy confirmed it. The flowers were so beautiful that I just wanted to look at them all the time. The scent was familiar, but Jiuzi had never seen such flowers before. Continuing to boast, the guy asked the girl if she was interested in how he managed to achieve this. Jiuzi was starting to get annoyed that the guy was bragging, and if he wanted to tell, he should do it now. The reason he didn't like the garden was because it was impossible to make a delicious dish without a variety of spices, and the 1,000-herb garden looked impressive, but the herbs were all the same type. The development of human cooking has always been accompanied by the discovery of new ingredients and spices, such as peppercorns, hot peppers, fresh butter, Tobin saucejiang, aged wine. Aromatic spices are all an important part of the dish. Without this variety, there is no point in even trying to cook something, and in their world there are too few herbs, and if he became a dragon cook, he must cook only the most delicious dishes. The goddess did not understand how the flower would help him with this. As they explained to him, the plants of the mortal world are incompatible with the world of the immortals. They cannot simply be grown here. Even on Earth, not all plants take root everywhere. They need certain soil and water, but there is another way. The comrades were already very curious about what method the hero came up with to grow plants here. The golden dragon also contributed, and this method was indeed very unusual. Having turned the dragon into a knife, the boy continued to talk about this unusual method. And finally, he revealed that this method is called grafting. Not understanding anything, the goddess suggested that vaccination was similar to vaccination. In fact, grafting is a method of artificial propagation of plants through cuttings, and it is a process in which a branch or bud is cut from one plant and attached to a branch of another. Two plants united in this way grow into a single whole, which allows the new plant to quickly adapt to the new environment and begin to bear fruit. However, he didn't expect it to work, but he still decided to try it, and it worked, and that's why he wanted to ask his friends if they knew what kind of flower it was. The taste, shape, and smell were similar to osmanthus, but it was not it, and the color and pattern resembled a snow orchid. This statement was correct, because it was an osmanthus with the characteristics of a snow orchid, and this meant that earthly plants could not only take root in the heavenly kingdom, but also acquire new qualities. And, if they complete Savanmu's task, she will be able to give them the peach of immortality, which they can plant here. The alarmed goddess thought that the dragon cook might have gone crazy, and the peach of immortality is a symbol of the life force of Queen Sawanmu, and it is an unaffordable luxury to plant it outside the jade pond, and plus, the peach outside it usually does not bear fruit, and therefore such an action seemed unreasonable to her. Smiling, the guy explained that this fruit can be grafted onto a fruit-bearing tree, and then the fruit will look like the peach of immortality. This really shocked the comrades, and they didn't even know how to react to it. In the garden grew melon pears, campsis fruits, immortal peach, ears of wheat, and even the root of the heavenly burrow, and they were all here, but different from the original, perhaps for the worse, and yet they could be grown in large quantities and sold. The goddess's reaction was instantaneous, and she absolutely did not like what the guy was saying. The angry girl forcefully hit the insolent man who dared to contradict her. However, it turned out that she really liked it, because their restaurant would now become the richest place, and Tin was a real genius. Then he remembered that the goddess had said that no one dared to plant the divine peach, and it might cause problems. In response to this, she decided to hire several scoundrels as bodyguards for the Taoed house, but if they were called gluttons and tried to drive them out, she would take action. Only the three of them will know about this plan, and if the information spreads, it will punish everyone. The joyful goddess demanded that the dragon cook prepare an excellent dish today. However, if he makes a mistake, something terrible will happen. With one blow, she demonstrated what could happen to the dragon cook if he made a mistake. This blow could cause the tree to fall, breaking into small pieces. The sight was frightening, and the guy did not want to make a mistake. Sometime later, events continued at Tao's house. The clever spirit studied a book on agriculture to master the art of grafting plants. The spirit recalled how the hero had previously told him that he had to master several new dishes, and he would need to take up gardening, and he went to his world to get books to learn all this. As Poe read, he remembered how easily he had agreed. The spirit's tears rolled down, realizing that he had made a great mistake. Because there were a huge number of books, and he needed to study them all. The divine spirit was surrounded by many books, which was not at all consistent with the previously told story of the protagonist. At this time, events developed in the kitchen, where Tin studied a variety of culinary techniques. Having cut a piece of an unknown vegetable, he decided to try it. With trembling hands, he brought a tiny piece of an unidentified vegetable to his lips to assess its true taste. Having placed it on his tongue, the hero was worried, not knowing what consequences might arise. He was shocked by what he felt, because the taste was completely unexpected. Instantly, the guy began to drink the water, trying to forget the disgusting taste. With strong disgust, Tin continued to drink water as if he had not drunk it for several days. It turned out that this vegetable was extremely spicy, causing severe muscle spasms. It turned out to be real Sichuan pepper, the impressive spiciness of which the hero did not suspect. The taste was unique, like home, but 1,000 times spicier, the guy exclaimed. Now, after trying all the flavors, he realized that the job was done perfectly. The goddess also expressed satisfaction that the spirit had mastered the contents of all the books, considering him to be a real talent. The joyful spirit thanked everyone for their support in helping him achieve success and promised to continue in the same spirit. Then the guy suggested that the next 100 species would be an easy test for the spirit. This upset little Poor, who was hoping for at least a little rest. Angered, the spirit began to express its dissatisfaction, considering 100 species too difficult a task, and spent a lot of time in the space of Taya, studying hundreds of books on botany, horticulture, and soil science for 30 years. He even entered the biology department of the institute, which was really difficult. The upset spirit began to complain to the goddess, claiming that 100 species were too many, and Tin wanted to kill him. Josie, waving her fists, ordered that all Ting's instructions be followed. Otherwise, they would study the new program even more carefully, not seeing anything wrong with him reading a lot. In any case, the spirit was indeed warmly praised, recognizing him as a great master. His work was important to the House of Taoed, and with his achievements they promised to surpass all generations of dragon chefs. The hero stated this with confidence. In addition, the guy planned to allocate part of his income to reward the spirit for his enormous contribution, although if he did not want this, then so be it. The goddess also expressed the opinion that in the immortal world there would be beings who would be willing to do this work for a high fee. After thinking a little, the spirit asked permission to express his question. Specifically, he wanted to know how much money he could get per year. Judging by the sales of heavenly chicken and pure soul crayfish with new spices, he should have no problem developing new dishes, which will increase sales 1,000 times, in which case, Juicy will of course get a larger share, the hero a second, and Spirit third. According to his calculations, the payment should have been at least 100,000 crystals per year. These words really inspired the protagonist's comrades, because they could hardly believe what he said. In their opinion, the embarrassed guy thought that this money would not be enough for them, given their future plans to expand restaurants and organize various events such as corporate parties, weddings, and funerals, and that's not all. Under the influence of strong motivation, Juicy exclaimed that it was necessary to put all these plans into action as soon as possible. The Spirit, in anticipation and laughing evilly, expected that it would be able to earn a significant amount of money. This behavior truly shocked Tina, since he had never imagined that his friends could behave like this. Joyful Juicy could not believe that she had the opportunity to receive so much money, and she rushed into the arms of the main character to make sure that the events were true. The guy immediately responded, saying that perhaps his calculations were not entirely accurate, and therefore it was necessary to check them yourself. Blushing, the Spirit turned to the main character, intending to express something important to him. Namely, he assured that he would do whatever Tin wished, and asked him not to say the words that he was going to say. Literally swearing before Mr. Mo, he assured that he would not leave Tai's space until he had studied every plant that was mentioned, and was willing to focus on this matter by relying on his spirit, and he was confident that, if necessary, he would achieve the rank of master or professor. Po wanted to plant thousands of herbs in the garden, not just ordinary ones, but all the plants in the world of mortals, immortals, the world of ghosts and demons. In anticipation, the Spirit aspired to become the master of the three worlds and the lord of universal gardening. Suddenly, a portal appeared in the sky nearby. A bright beam erupted from the portal, aimed directly at Tao's house. A magical glow filled every room of the house where the main character and his friends were. Juicy instantly realized that Goddess Sawanmu was about to appear to them. Lotuses were blooming in the jade pond, and the dragon cook, the chief cook in the house of Tao, was invited to prepare a feast for Bai Hud. The best cooking team in the world headed to the jade pond. The brave guy was already anticipating that the peach of immortality would soon become his. Sometime later, events unfolded in the royal garden. The team climbed a huge mountain. Every step was difficult. The stairs up the mountain were impressive. And the world itself turned out to be amazing, striking in its beauty. Turning around, the hero noticed a jade pond nearby. Indeed, the pond was located on a levitating island, and from afar a huge blooming flower was visible. Approaching the pond, it was necessary to inform the goddess Savanmu that the dragon's cook was already here. Radiating a strong, enthusiastic feeling, the guy exclaimed that when he first came to Tao's house, it seemed to him that there was no more wonderful place in this world, but now it surpassed all his expectations. With a strong slap on the forehead of the main character, Juicy explained that the Jade Pond and the House of Tao should not be compared, and Empress Sawanmu, being the wife of the Jade Emperor, has domains much more magnificent than their restaurant. But the Spirit entered into an argument, claiming that Juicy herself had wandered through the human world for centuries. Pa began to argue with her, which made her angry, and she grabbed his head. The impudent Spirit received a well-deserved reprimand, and the hero asked where the peach tree was. The question was naive, and the girl answered that such trees do not grow on every corner. The peach garden was a small but carefully guarded space, access to which was only possible with the permission of the Empress. Even immortals had no right of entry. The guy didn't think it was anything special and even suggested that the monkey might have already stolen some peaches, referring to the Chinese myth about the adventures of the Monkey King from the novel Journey to the West, and in this legend, Sun Wukong was a mercenary of the Jade Emperor, who entrusted him with guarding the peach garden of the goddess Savanmu. On the eve of the feasts arranged by the goddess for other deities and immortals, Sun Wukong ate all the peaches in the garden, and then, using cunning, entered the heavenly palace and drank the elixir of immortality, intended for the celestials. The main character knew this story well, and realized that in the human world there was a legend about how Sun Wukong caused noise in the Sawanmu garden. The goddess quickly decided to stop the chatty man from talking as he was revealing too much. The smart girl realized that even accidentally pronouncing this name could lead to inevitable death, and therefore it was not worth the risk. This guy was good, and had an excellent voice and hearing, amazing eyesight, admirable courage, and he even visited Tao's house. But here, whoever remembers the past faces the end. Sometime later, events developed somewhere in China. Two monkeys were carrying someone a divine peach, as if in the form of an offering. It was really difficult for the little monkeys to carry such a huge fruit. This offering was intended for Sun Wukong, who saw a huge peach. The deity immediately took the fruit to examine it. The Monkey King began to eat the fruit that his subjects had prepared. The worried monkeys waited for their king's reaction to see if he liked the fruit. Unfortunately, Sun Wukong shouted that this peach was not the same and did not meet his expectations. The fact that it was not the same peach made him very angry, because the fruit was not like the one that grew in the heavenly kingdom. After his atrocities, Sun Wukong was taken to the heavenly palace, where he tried to escape, but was captured and banished to earth, then crushed by a mountain, by none other than Empress Sawanmu. The upset Sun Wukong greatly missed the kitchen of the human world and asked to bring the two deaths here so that they could cook something for him. But bringing mortals into the immortal world was a crime, and these cooks were not able to cope with their ingredients, and earthly food in large quantities could take a lot of energy, despite the incredible taste. The Monkey King could not tolerate this, because he had been eating fruit all his life, and now, being immortal, he continued to do so. Recently, a servant heard good news that he wanted to convey. The old man reported that Tao's house had opened its doors again, and Sun Wukong remembered that he had not been there since last time. The man also shared that sales are going very well. The Monkey King realized with a smile that this was really great news, and he didn't like it there the last time, but apparently, now the situation has changed for the better. Because of this, he decided that he must definitely visit this place and find out where the owners were. Within seconds, the Monkey King was already running out of his cave. In the blink of an eye, he appeared on one of the trees, and despite the fact that the gentleman did not leave his shelter for a long time, he still had to be very careful, because the world could change a lot in his absence. Using his magical abilities, Sun Wukong began scanning the space to discover the location of the mistress of the Tao house. While looking at the environment, the Monkey King discovered that they were at a jade pond. Sun Wukong also noticed that the new dragon chef was a boy. Smiling, the Monkey King realized that he had not eaten the peaches of immortality for a long time. The old man behind him suggested that the gentleman place an order for home delivery. But the answer was not heard, and the king, not wanting to listen to the old man, continued his movement. Sometime later, events unfolded at the jade pond. Coming closer, the company of a friend discovered several girls guarding the pond. The tired hero was very glad that they finally got up. Jiuzi began to communicate with the girls nearby, announcing that they were representatives of the Taodai house, and they were invited to hold a banquet in the jade pond for the empress. The two girls looked at each other and didn't know what to answer. The atmosphere became very tense, and Tin immediately noticed this, because they were not even greeted. Suddenly a silhouette appeared nearby, and the stranger asked if this boy was really the dragon's new cook. The goddess exclaimed, confirming that this was exactly the case, and answered the lady that his name was Tin. It turned out that it was Savanmu, who wanted to find out how old this young man was. A little embarrassed, the guy replied that he was only 16 years old. He was indeed very young, but also had great talent, and the goddess was confident that Tin's abilities would impress Savanmu. Unexpectedly, the goddess repeated the age of the main character. After this, she exclaimed that the dragon's cook was still too young and should go back. This statement really shocked Tin, because they had come a very long way to get here. Savanmu admitted that there are geniuses in this world, but perfecting any skill takes time. This banquet is held very rarely, its ingredients blooming only once every century. And Savanmu was not sure that they would not waste these treasures in vain. These statements really caused indignation in the hero, and he sought to answer the goddess. Josie did her best to protect the dragon chef, claiming in front of Lady Zawanmu that Imo Ting was a dragon chef approved by the sharpest knife, and he would definitely not let her down. In the Jade Pond, nymphs called Baihoa are taken care of, and for a long time they could not enjoy the fruits of their labor, but despite this, they did not stop their efforts, and if someone treats this treasure without respect, it causes deep sadness. Turning to Josie, Zawanmu explained that her decision might seem cruel, but she could not trust the dragon in this matter. She repeatedly asked them to leave so as not to force her to repeat her previous words. The girl, continuing to be indignant, wanted to argue with this decision and tried to express her thoughts. But suddenly the main character decided to stop her and grabbed her hand. For the Empress has already expressed her decision, and there is no point in arguing here. Smiling and winking at the girl, Tin asked her to leave the room with him. Sometime later, they were already descending from the Jade Pond, and Jiazi wanted to ask Ting whether he really believed that Lady Sawanmu's decision could be changed. The guy realized that the girl's opinion was simply an outdated way of thinking. She was not able to adapt to the new generation, and there was no point in suffering because of it. In any case, it was very important for them to get that same peach. The hero understood that they would not be able to change her views in this life, but sooner or later he would force her to reconsider her point of view. He will force him in such a way that Savanmu will literally beg him. Juzi realized that this was highly unlikely, and although there was no harm in dreaming, it was difficult to imagine how an ordinary dragon cook could make the Empress beg. Now they have already left the Jade Pond area, so the Empress should not care what they do there. The alarmed goddess wanted to find out from the dragon cook what he was up to. The resourceful guy had a specific plan, and he asked the spirit to move the kitchen from the old Taoed house here. Using his magical powers, he easily moved the old kitchen. Now a shop had appeared in this place, and Jiuzi was very annoyed by this, because she did not understand who would buy anything here in such a secluded place. Tin asked not to worry about this and suggested a better answer to the question, and then he asked the goddess what, in her opinion, mortal girls like to eat most. After a moment of thoughtfulness, Jiuzi could not give an exact answer, since on Earth all the dishes were really tasty, and she did not know this. Turning around, the smart guy revealed the secret of this matter by pointing to the snacks. After a few seconds, the goddess also remembered that she also liked snacks when she was on Earth. Girls can refuse the main course, but not the appetizers, and besides, the gods ate tasteless food for several decades. Tin sought to convey to Savanmu the power of cooking, which has been smoked for thousands of years, so that she would not deprive her servants of delicious food. He was clearly aware of his merit in the title of Dragon Chef, and was ready to prove it to Empress Sawanmu. Sometime later, events developed in one of the divine towns. Namely, in the building where the Empress consumed her tasteless food. A little girl nearby was peeking around the wall to make sure no one noticed her. Slowly approaching, she secretly watched the guards, trying to remain unnoticed. Suddenly, one of the guards turned around and noticed a little girl. The guard exclaimed, ordering the girl to stay where she was and not try to run away. The worried girl began to hide something behind her back, claiming that she had not done anything wrong. Dissatisfied guards approached, trying to find out what the baby was holding behind her back. The alarmed girl realized that she could be punished for what she was hiding. It turned out that she was hiding a small bag from Tao's house. The bag contained only snacks, neatly packaged. A pleasant aroma emanated from the package, which became noticeable to everyone in the room. Such a divine smell delighted the guards, who turned their attention to the little girl. The guard was offended by this, Since the bodies of nymphs were created to connect with nature, they should not be stained with traces of evil and greed, and the smell of her snacks seemed strange, unclean. The little girl pulled out one snack and wanted to show it off. After putting it in her mouth, the girl slowly began to chew the snack she had recently bought from Tao's house. The joyful cutie said that she bought these snacks from the dragon cook, summoned by the three worlds, and how can he be evil if everything in their house is hygienic, she argued. After all, they have served in this building for many years, doing their job every day. The guards actually realized the truth and did not even argue with the little girl. In any case, the little girl couldn't even count, but she just knew it. That every day is hard work. And for many years the girl felt unhappy because of this work. But today, after tasting these snacks, she felt the taste of real food, which felt like real happiness. It was also learned that Dr. Chun had exchanged the wind lily for something unusual, and despite the rarity of this flower, the guards wanted to know what she gave in this exchange. She then exclaimed that she had given Empress Suwanmu's most precious treasure, the golden essence of the sun. Worried guards were shocked, realizing that this was the most valuable fire attribute of the three worlds. And this delicacy cost only 3 bags of this precious attribute. The angry nymphs understood that such a system was completely dishonest, and Suwanmu should find out about such an exchange as soon as possible. Meanwhile, events developed not far from the small shop of the Tao house. All visitors were delighted with the incredibly tasty dishes and wanted to try each of them. The dragon's cook shouted at the visitors to keep order and not rush, as there would be enough for everyone. A huge number of orders awaited the house of Tao, and the hero really foresaw this. Although Tin did not have time, he tried very hard, which was noticeable to all visitors. Some of the visitors stood out for their incredible beauty, literally begging for faster service. Each of the ladies could not get enough of the delicious dishes and begged for another portion. The main character was surrounded by beautiful women, which greatly embarrassed him. Suddenly, someone decided to intervene and interrupt the flow of charm. Juzi reassured them by announcing that all the dishes were sold out, and that was all they, the nymphs, had to offer, and she stressed that next time they should hurry to get the delicious treats. The restless visitor asked the goddess to be more courteous, reminding them that they were regular customers. However, the goddess did not like the behavior of the nymphs very much, and she ordered them to move away from the dragon cook. The frightened nymphs ran away in fear, wondering why Juzi was acting this way. Seeing off regular customers, Tin invited them to take care of themselves and return to their shop. Business was booming, but the hero still did not understand why the goddess was so angry. The smart spirit realized that Juzi was not just angry this time. Suddenly the hero realized that he understood and began to think that Juzi was probably angry because she didn't eat enough today. This assumption turned out to be completely wrong, and the guy got punched in the face. At this time, someone on the tree was carefully watching everything that was happening. It was Sun Wukong who admired this dragon chef, and he was truly impressed. This guy clearly had amazing knowledge about the preferences of nymphs, although he looked relatively young. Suddenly, the Monkey King heard someone nearby loudly eating snacks and grunting. Behind the tree was a huge pig, also enjoying tasty treats. The pig was delighted with the goodies and told her brother how delicious they were. This seriously angered Sun Wukong, who called the pig to express his opinion, but she continued to only eat and crunch. Perhaps the pig believes that Suwanmu is the wisest woman in the three worlds, and she will handle this small matter. This seems to be the case, and the pig assumes that her brother wants to help this boy. The Monkey King burst out laughing and confirmed that this was indeed the case. While the pig wonders if Sun Wukong is worried about possible problems. The only thing in which this world is imperfect is his culinary talents. Despite this young man copes well with nymphs. Waiting impatiently, Sun Wukong decides to ask the pig if he thinks the dragon cook will treat them. Suddenly it dawned on the pig, and she realized something important. Namely, They will have the opportunity to enjoy great food without spending money. This thought really made the pig happy, and she felt that she needed to contribute to this situation. Meanwhile, the hero and his friends are relaxing and realizing that the nymphs are eccentric and mutually influencing women. In their world, girls also love to eat, but here it manifests itself on a larger scale, the hero notes. Savamu agrees, explaining that this is why the mortal world is more suitable for her. The enterprising girl also wants to know how much they earned today. Upon opening the box, the spirit realizes that they are in serious financial difficulties. His expression changes, and he shouts that things are going badly. Not understanding anything, the friends turn around to see what is happening. The spirit practically cries, blaming Ting for selling snacks from Taoya's house garden and accepting valuables as payment. The indignant goddess does not understand why the spirit says this, because they did not demand payment. As they get closer, the friends decide to look into the box to see how much they have earned. Half of the Jade Pawn's treasures are in their hands, and the spirit sees some fairies selling their clothes. This was in fact an open robbery, and Po wanted to emphasize that despite the care and caution of the Empress, if their property acquired by many years of labor was stolen in just one day, it is not known what they would have done. For a group of friends, this was a real shock, and they realized that it was better to close this business and leave this place. Suddenly, at the same moment, a purple portal appeared from the sky. A bright light began to flicker very close to the group of friends, which made them very scared. In the blink of an eye, several unidentified silhouettes appeared nearby, and they seemed to have very negative intentions. It turned out that they were the nymphs who reported that Empress Sawanmu had invited 3 representatives of the Taodai house to visit the Jade Pond right now. With a smile, the guy said that this was really good news. However, Jiuzi and Pu did not share his optimism and were very afraid. Tin was delighted and asked his friends if they thought the Empress would reward them for their services.